Chapter 10-11. However, very few people dared to place bets at this table. Hence, to sit at this table, one had to bet at least 5 million yuan, and the chips would continue to rise as the game progressed. At this moment, however, no one was paying attention to whether someone was placing bets at this table. Everyone's eyes were on a little lad in a black shirt. This little boy, who was only 6 or 7 years old, had exchanged chips from the dealer half an hour ago. At that time, he only had a few 100,000 yuan worth of chips. The moment he entered the gambling hall, he walked to the French roulette with ease and placed tens of thousands of yuan on it. His nonchalant expression made it seem as if gambling, to him, was just a simple game. Xiao Yichen stood nervously beside Yu Yu. Earlier, he was bored waiting outside the door, so he said that he wanted to take a look around the casino. Seeing that it was interesting, he exchanged chips to relieve his boredom. At that time, no one paid much attention to him. Most of them thought that he was just an extremely naive little lad who dared to enter the casino after stealing so much money from somewhere. Gambling at such a young age, he was truly a wastrel. A kind-hearted person stepped forward to persuade him, but Yu Yu merely replied unhurriedly, "Hee hee. I'm just casually playing." Casually playing, this was a slang in the casino. Usually, those who said this were here to challenge the place. Which one of the people standing here hadn't gambled for more than 10 years? Without so many years of experience, who would dare to roll up their sleeves and roll the dice here? This little lad with a mere few 100,000 yuan, which was not even enough to open the table, dared to spout such arrogant words here. He was young and did not know the rules, yet he wanted to challenge the place. What a joke! Many people mocked and ridiculed him, but Yu Yu merely crossed his arms and leaned lazily against the table. His lips curled into a devilish smile as he pushed all the chips to the table, making people feel guilty. Staking it all on one throw. The banker's eyes could not help but reveal a trace of contempt. The roulette spun once, and everyone turned pale with fright. Unexpectedly, Yu Yu won the first round and earned a lot of money. Yu Yu accepted the bet without a change in his expression. His face was still wearing a nonchalant smile. His expression was calm, and yet, it was not a smile. He looked at the money he had won and shook his head helplessly. He said mildly, "I was just lucky." Under everyone's dumbfounded gaze, he immediately threw all his capital and the chips he won on the table, as if he was going to continue the game. The banker looked at him and thought to himself that it was just a fluke. There was no reason for him to continue winning. Everyone placed their bets, and after a few rounds, Yu Yu's chips became more and more impressive. In the beginning, the crowd looked down on him, but now they were all following him to place their bets. The fiery atmosphere in the gambling hall was a sharp contrast. Although he had won a lot of chips, the child's face was still calm. He only smiled and played with the chips in his hand. The banker's forehead was sweating, and he didn't dare to make a move. More and more gamblers followed behind Yu Yu, but the banker still did not place his bet. Yu Yu suddenly looked up. He raised a finger lazily and shook it gently. He said mildly, "You can't." Chapter 10-12. He had been in the casino for more than 20 years and had been playing since he was 10 years old. This lad was clearly trying to humiliate him. However, despite his anger, it was an undeniable fact that he had lost to a child. He had never lost so thoroughly in all his years of playing. He did not even have the will to fight anymore. The dealer pushed down his chips and simply admitted defeat. Yu Yu looked at him with a smile. A dealer in a purple uniform walked up to him and carefully collected all the chips he had won. Xiao Yichen whispered in his ear in disbelief, "Yu Yu, are you that good? You actually won more than a few million." Yu Yu glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and hooked his finger at him. Xiao Yichen leaned over. Yu Yu said flatly, "Idiot, I cheated." Xiao Yichen, in the small dark room, the atmosphere was heated. It was the time for endless battle. The first time was naturally accompanied by pain, but compared to the seemingly endless emptiness and stimulation in Lu Jingtian's body, it was nothing. With the guidance of the drug, she seemed to have turned into a flirtatious vixen. She twisted her body seductively and cooperated fully no matter what position he took. Li Dongxiang was the first to admit defeat and was somewhat helpless. It had to be said that this drug was really very strong. Even if it was a jade maiden, it could also turn her into a slut. While he was panting, Lu Jingtian came up to him again, panting heavily. The impatience on her face showed that she had no intention of giving up. Li Dongxiang did not want to do it at first, but the drug had yet to wear off, so he could not push her away no matter how hard he tried. Moreover, he had to take into account his male dignity in front of his underlings. Thus, he secretly took a pill, regained his manhood, and pounced on her anxiously. His breathing was chaotic. His breathing was disorderly. The scene was especially unbearable for a moment. The small iron bed kept shaking and creaking. Under the violent movements, it made a sinister sound. This was the rhythm of squeezing them all dry. Lu Jingtian had no idea what earth-shattering thing she was doing. Neither was she aware of the lewd expression on her face, nor was she aware of her high-pitched moans. It took a full 2 hours for the drug to wear off. 5 to 6 men took turns to do it before the drug finally wore off. Wasn't this drug too powerful? Wasn't this the rhythm of wanting to destroy him? The others were also exhausted, and the room was filled with the sound of panting. When things calmed down, Li Dongxiang felt that his waist was about to collapse. He threw himself onto the bed. His waist was sore and painful. It was simply unbearable. It seemed that this kind of thing should really be controlled. Now that his vitality was greatly damaged, it seemed that he would not be able to recuperate for 3 to 5 days. On the other side, the effects of the drug had subsided, and the fire in her body had mostly been vented. Lu Jingtian finally regained her senses, but when she saw the unbearable scene before her, she was first stunned before her face turned ghastly pale. What happened? Without waiting for her to react, a scream escaped from her throat. Ah! You guys! You guys! She held her face and screamed continuously. Suddenly, she realized that she was naked. Looking down, she realized that she was completely naked. This frightened her even more. Chapter 1013. Only then did she realize with a start that she had lost her virginity. Oh, God, what's going on? She wanted to scream, but she was too frightened to do so. She blinked her eyes, and large droplets of tears rolled down her cheeks at once. What's going on? She hurriedly grabbed a piece of clothing from the side. She did not care whose it was, as long as it could at least cover her body. She was so frightened that her body kept retreating backward. Her pale face suddenly turned purple as her lips trembled uncontrollably. Humiliation. She felt a bone-chilling humiliation. She came from a well-to-do family, and her upbringing was very strict. Therefore, even when she grew up, she was like other girls who liked to play and make friends, but she always stuck to her bottom line. Her father taught her that a girl's chastity was the most important thing. But now, everything had been destroyed. She had actually lost her virginity to this group of ruffians at the bottom of society. Lu Jingtian's whole body trembled as she kept sizing up Li Dongxiang, who was sitting at the side and panting heavily. Her heart sank to the bottom of the valley. Women always had many beautiful fantasies about their first time. Alas, she would never have thought that her first time would be cruelly sullied by these ruffians in front of her. Looking at Li Dongxiang, looking at his dark skin, ugly and ferocious appearance, his body full of fat, and especially that fat and oily big belly, she was even more disgusted. At this moment, her face was as contorted as it could be. She bit her lower lip angrily, and the humiliation was so deep that it bled. B*****. You bunch of beasts. Shameless. Scumbag. Lu Jingtian cursed the moment she opened her mouth, using the most insulting words she could think of. Smack. Li Dongxiang gave her a slap. Slut. Who was the one who stuck to me just now? What's the point of being a B****tch? D***mn it. Shameless, he scolded. She held her burning cheek aggrievedly. Her eyes were red and swollen, and they were bloodshot as she glared at them hatefully. If you didn't use any underhanded means, do you think I'd be interested in you? All of you look like pigs. Shameless. B*TCH. Lu Jingtian seemed to have lost her rationality as she let loose a torrent of abuse. Lu Jingtian scrambled to put on her clothes. Looking at the bruises all over her body, she was in a sorry state. She suddenly couldn't hold it in any longer and broke down in tears. She covered her face and deeply felt that she had no face to see anyone. Woo-woo. You bunch of beasts, scum. I hate you to death. The doors suddenly opened. Yun Tianyu and Xiao Yichen walked in. Everyone in the room had put on their clothes, and the scene seemed calm. However, from the redness on their faces and the lingering charm in the air, Yun Tianyu knew that they had just experienced an intense battle. He laughed, but his expression was cold. Have you enjoyed yourself to your heart's content? Asked the boy in a calm and unhurried tone. Have you had enough fun? This brat. Chapter 10:14. It has nothing to do with my mommy. Xiao Yichen coldly snorted. Bad woman, you're the one who bullied my mommy first. We're just returning the favor. Lu Jingtian only felt embarrassed and ashamed, but more than that, she flew into a rage out of humiliation. Yu Yu's cold and mocking gaze almost drove her crazy. She completely lost her rationality. If she could, she really wanted to strangle him and tear his hateful face apart. She really couldn't wait to make these two brats disappear from her sight. B*ST*RD. She rolled off the bed and pounced on Yun Tianyu. Yun Tianyu, however, did not move. He was not afraid of this crazy woman at all. Alas, she had forgotten about the chaotic battle she had just gone through. Just as her toes touched the ground, she felt her legs give way and fell to the ground with a plop. Her limbs were as heavy as lead, and she could not even lift her wrists. She was filled with resentment. Yun Tianyu smiled coldly and took a few steps toward her until he was right in front of her. He lowered his head and looked at her from above, admiring the changing expressions on her face. Humiliation, resentment, madness, pain, despair. Everything was in his eyes. He admitted that his method was indeed cruel. However, this was the only way to appease the hatred in his heart. He would never forgive anyone who touched his reverse scale. A pitiful person must have something to hate. Yun Tianyu told Li Dongxiang, send her back. Li Dongxiang nodded, but he was still panting heavily. He had yet to calm down and was on the brink of exhaustion. Yun Tianyu turned to leave, but he suddenly thought of something. He turned back and bent slightly. His cold and unfathomable eyes met with Lu Jingtian's dazed ones. Don't blame me for being ruthless if you dare to make a fuss about what happened today. Lu Jingtian was stunned. This child had a charisma that made one unable to look him in the eye. That pair of cold eyes actually oppressed her to the point that she couldn't breathe. I'll let you off today, but if you dare to bully my mommy again, Yun Tianyu paused and narrowed his eyes. Do you believe me? With just a word from me, the entire Lu clan will die without a burial ground overnight. Do you believe it? With just a word from me, the entire Lu clan will die without a burial ground overnight. These extremely bold words seemed to come from the mouth of an emperor who could summon the wind and summon the rain. Lu Jingtian's mouth was agape, but even after the two left, she still could not regain her senses. The fear in his heart was suddenly magnified. Lu residence. By the time she hailed a cab back to the Lu residence, it was almost dawn. She held back her tears and tightly clenched her fists. No matter how hard she tried to suppress herself, her shoulders couldn't stop trembling. She felt like a mermaid. Every step she took felt like she was walking on the edge of a sword. It was unbearably painful. She walked to the door and slowly pushed it open, only to be greeted by a brightly lit room. She was stunned and stood rooted to the ground. She saw Lu Busheng sitting on the sofa in the spacious living room. It seemed that he had been waiting for a long time. She was stunned for a few seconds. When she came to her senses, she quickly lowered her head and hurried upstairs. "Stop right there!" Lu Busheng bellowed majestically. Chapter 10:15. She shuddered and turned around with trembling lips. Pursing her lips, she did not bother to raise her head and only called out, "Dad." Usually, when she returned home late, her father would be long asleep. Why did she have to bump into him tonight? He asked coldly, "It's so late, where did you go? Why are you only back now? Do you still know that this house exists?" She felt countless grievances and despair choking her throat, making it difficult for her to speak. She once again recalled what had happened tonight, which made her feel extremely humiliated. The tearing pain deep in her body reminded her of the shame and anger she felt. Resisting the urge to break down, she said in a muffled voice, "I went out to play." She did not want anyone to know about this. Even her closest family did not want them to know about it. She was utterly disgraced. She was too ashamed to face anyone. If her father were to know that she had given her virginity to a group of unknown hooligans, he would be so angry that he would kill her. It was simply a nightmare. It was a stain that she could not erase no matter how hard she tried. "You went to the bar again?" Lu Busheng snorted, clearly extremely dissatisfied. He was about to lecture her when she hurriedly said, "Dad, I'm tired. I'm tired, I'll go back to my room to sleep first." She tried to avoid him, but her father angrily said, "Stop right there. Did I allow you to leave?" She stood there awkwardly, sweating profusely from anxiety. "You want to leave before I'm done talking? Is this how you treat your elders? What time is it now? You only came back from playing, do you still have this house in your eyes?" As he lectured her, he said, "What are you waiting for?" It was clear that he was going to lecture her. How could she face him in her current state, though? She gritted her teeth and stayed where she was. Lu Busheng was even angrier. "What? I told you to come over, why aren't you moving? Have you grown wings after being a year older? What are you waiting for?" His sternness made her tear up even more. She suddenly started sobbing softly. She felt so embarrassed. If Lu Busheng were to see her like this, she would lose her last bit of dignity. Lu Busheng got even angrier. He suddenly got up, walked up to her, and grabbed her arm. Lu Jingtian stumbled and fell right in front of him. What he saw in front of him, however, greatly shocked him. Her exposed arms, shoulders, and collarbones were densely covered with all kinds of ambiguous marks of strangulation and kisses. Looking at her face, it was red and swollen. It was clear that she had been raped. When Lu Busheng saw everything clearly, he subconsciously slapped him in the face. Lu Jingtian could not take it anymore and fell to the ground. She lowered her head and let her hair cover her face in the shadows. "You! What the hell are you doing? How did a girl end up like this?" Lu Busheng was exasperated at her failure to live up to his expectations. His first reaction was that he had no idea who she was fooling around with again. Lu Busheng had high expectations for her, and he had always hoped that she could marry into a prestigious family. Prestigious families valued a girl's innocence the most. The way she was acting really disappointed him. Lu Busheng's rage made her feel ashamed and aggrieved. She held her face as her lips trembled. Large droplets of tears rolled down her pale cheeks, making one's heart ache for her. Chapter 10:16. Lu Busheng's rage made her feel ashamed and aggrieved. She held her face as her lips trembled. Large droplets of tears rolled down her pale face, making one's heart ache for her. Lu Busheng's heart ached as he looked at her haggard and disheveled appearance. He reached out to help her up, but she avoided his advances. She avoided his action, though. Suppressing her grievances, she got up from the floor and ran upstairs without looking back. Bang! The door was slammed shut. Lu Busheng lowered his head to look at his burning palm. He had used a lot of strength in his anger earlier. In a moment of anger, he had given her a slap. Now, he was filled with regret. Lu Busheng went upstairs to Lu Jingtian's room, only to hear her sobbing. Worried, he knocked on the door, but the crying stopped abruptly. Tian, it's Daddy's fault. I shouldn't have hit you. Open the door and tell Daddy what's going on, okay? Don't bother about me. Go away, just go away. She cried. Lu Busheng furrowed his brows, his heart burning with anxiety. Alas, she did not mention it to him at all. He sighed. Since it had already happened, there was no point in pursuing how it happened. He would properly interrogate her about this matter after she calmed down a little. Lu Busheng's footsteps gradually faded away. Only then did Lu Jingtian burst into tears. She walked into the bathroom and scrubbed her body over and over again. However, no matter how many times she used the shower gel and scrubbed her body vigorously, as if trying to scrape off a layer of skin, she still felt that her body was so dirty that it could not be washed clean. Thus, she hugged her body and squatted in the bathtub, crying helplessly. She thought that this matter would be over just like that. However, the next day, something unexpected happened. Lu Jingtian was still asleep in the morning. She came home late, took a shower, and cried under the blanket for a long time before she finally fell asleep. It was a call from Song Enya that woke her up. Where's Jingtian? Where are you now? Lu Jingtian was baffled by his question. She was still groggy from sleep, so she hoarsely replied, I'm at home. You're still sleeping? Song Enya was dumbfounded. She was still sleeping like nothing had happened even after such a big thing had happened. Lu Jingtian was even more confused now. I slept very late last night. Enya, what's wrong? From your tone, it sounds like something bad has happened. You'd better take a look at Weibo yourself. I only just found out. Hurry and take a look. The Missy's words gave her an ominous premonition. She quickly switched on the tablet and entered the Weibo app. The moment she opened the front page, she saw hashtag Lu Jingtian's sexy photos hashtag dominating the headlines. Lu Jingtian was so shocked that she almost choked. She covered her mouth as her eyes widened in shock. It turned out that Li Dongqiang had recorded a complete video yesterday. After editing it, he had uploaded a few screenshots to the internet. Other than Lu Jingtian, everyone else had been censored out. In the screenshots, Lu Jingtian's hair was disheveled, and her expression was enchanting. Her facial features were so clear that one could almost tell who the woman in the video was at once. Lu Jingtian's hand, which was holding the tablet, trembled uncontrollably. Chapter 1017. At first, the netizens were a little skeptical, thinking that it might just be a coincidence that someone looked similar to Lu Jingtian. Soon, a mysterious ID released an even higher resolution image. The netizens could see it more clearly. There was a very obvious feature on her face. There was a mole at the corner of her mouth. This feature instantly confirmed her crime. Her mind went blank with a bang, and she was petrified as if she had been struck by lightning. Soon after, the media published a few photos of her in a bar, which showed her rubbing her ears intimately with a stranger. Perhaps it was because of the angle, but her expression looked especially slutty. With a cigarette in one hand, she laughed and fell into the man's arms. She looked like a prostitute. Some paparazzi even took photos of her hugging another man in a bar. It was such a hot scene that people could not help but sigh. Lu Jingtian looked pure on the surface, but she was actually such a person in private. How despicable. The photos were quickly spread all over Weibo, and the public opinion about her instantly dropped to the lowest point. Oh, my God. Seeing such explosive news so early in the morning, my worldview has been turned upside down. Is Lu Jingtian so open? She seems to be quite fun in private, and she seems to be quite fierce. I'm from the capital. I once bumped into her at Sovereign Bar. She was with a man, and they were very close. I wanted to take a photo, but it was too dark, so I couldn't get a clear picture. I was also afraid of getting into trouble, so I didn't take a photo. I thought that she was just a scheming woman. I didn't expect her to be such a despicable woman in private. How disgusting. The netizens left comments saying that Lu Jingtian was a vicious and scheming woman. They had never seen such a shameless female celebrity before. The mysterious ID seemed to have left her some leeway by not releasing the video. Lu Jingtian was petrified and did not react for a long time. This time, she had fallen into a state of eternal damnation. All the public opinion was overwhelmingly accusing her of it. Lu Jingtian could not help but recall her private diary on a personal blog. Harboring hatred for Yun Shishir, she wrote in the diary, "If there's a chance, I must let Yun Shishir, that be *tch, have a taste of humiliation. First, drug her, then throw her to 5 hooligans. Finally, I'll record the whole process and post it online. Let everyone take a good look at the so-called national first love, in their eyes, how slutty and despicable she was in private." He. Was it an illusion? Why was her experience now exactly the same as the content of the private diary she had written on her blog? Could it be? Impossible. Her diary was a private diary that was locked. Other than her, no one else had seen it. Yun Tianyu received a call from Li Hanlin. According to his instructions, the latter had already finished editing the video and bribed various public relations teams to spread rumors about Lu Jingtian's indecent deeds on the internet. Later, remember to release the surveillance video. This is the highlight of the show. Yes. However, President Yun, don't you think you're being a little too ruthless? Chapter 1018. The truth behind Lu Jingtian's pornographic photos. Look at those celebrities, who appear pure on the surface, in private. Lu Jingtian's pornographic photos scandal escalates. Lu Jingtian closes her Weibo account, guilty conscience. For the next few days, the scandal regarding Lu Jingtian's pornographic photos continued to fester. Recently, however, a small Weibo account suddenly released a short surveillance video. The video was very short, lasting only a few minutes. When the video was played, it showed Lu Jingtian beating up a woman in a hotel corridor. Although it was said to be a beating, the woman was indeed ruthless. The clip of Lu Jingtian beating up Yun Na like a madwoman shocked many people. The reason why they could recognize Lu Jingtian at a glance was that her gown was very recognizable, so it was not difficult to distinguish her. This was what Lu Jingtian wore to Huanyu's gala, which was published in the newspapers. The Imperial Hotel's camera angle was very wide, and it was aimed at the corridor and the elevator door. There were 2 shots taken from different angles. When the first video was opened, it was still a little unclear. From this angle, one could only vaguely make out Lu Jingtian's back. As for the facial features of the person she was beating up, it was too blurry for one to recognize. When the second video was opened, it was aimed at the front of the 2 people. The angle was accurate, and the facial features were clear, so one could recognize Lu Jingtian at a glance. The shot was very clear, so Lu Jingtian's face was exposed. As soon as the video was released, it quickly attracted countless shares and views. In just a few minutes, it was read tens of thousands, and countless people fought to share it. Lu Jingtian's pornographic photos also reached a boiling point. Lu Jingtian's character was soon questioned from all sides. Oh, God! I didn't expect Lu Jingtian to be so violent, that woman is so scary. She looks like a lotus on the surface, but I didn't expect her to be so dark inside. Lu Jingtian is too scary. How can a woman like her be a celebrity? Lu Jingtian should get out of showbiz. An anonymous netizen put up a poll to hashtag Lu Jingtian get out of showbiz hashtag. At first, Lu Jingtian's team tried to calm the matter down. However, no matter how brilliant a team was, in the face of such an irrefutable fact, there was no room for negotiation. Yun Tianyu's PR team worked overnight to prepare a press release to smear Lu Jingtian's reputation. By then, she was already in a mess. Under the immense pressure of public opinion, under Lu Busheng's arrangement, Lu Jingtian left the country overnight to avoid the limelight. Lu Busheng had no idea what was going on, but he had been in the entertainment industry for many years, so he could more or less guess what was going on. His daughter must have offended some big shot, and that was why she was being suppressed. Alas, no matter how he interrogated her, she refused to divulge anything. She feared him from the bottom of her heart. Even though this was clearly a child under the age of 8, she could not help but feel terrified when she thought about the cause and effect of this matter. In just one night, this child was able to ruin her reputation effortlessly. No matter how he did it. Then, he would also have the ability to flatten the Lu clan with a single finger. Hence, she dared not speak up no matter what. Chapter 10:19. On the other hand, Yun Shishir was a little surprised by the uproar caused by Lu Jingtian's post on Weibo. She did not feel anything when she saw the articles bombarding Lu Jingtian on Weibo. It was an indescribable feeling. Lu Jingtian's fall did not give her much of a reaction. She only treated it as a piece of news and let it go after she read it. On this day, Mushi called her, unable to hide her excitement. The casting for Lethal Beauty seemed to have taken a turn for the better. The investor, who had seen her photo, seemed to be interested in her and invited her out for a meal to discuss the film contract. Mushi excitedly said, Sure, I've heard some insider news. Director Gu thinks highly of your acting skills and thinks that you can play the leading role, so he strongly recommended you to the investor. The investor saw your photo and thinks that your image is very suitable for the role, so he invited you out for a meal. The investor. There are 2 investors for Lethal Beauty. One is Chungguang Entertainment, and the other is Global Pictures, a very famous production company. Sure, do you want to give it a try? Who knows, you might succeed. It turned out that, although the producer had directly kicked Yun Shishir out of the list for that audition, Gu Xiaoyang was very satisfied with Yun Shishir's performance. Hence, he strongly recommended Yun Shishir to the head of Global Pictures, Sun Hua. Sun Hua watched Yun Shishir's audition video and was very satisfied with it, too. Her acting skills were explosive, and her eyes and expressions were very intense. Moreover, Gu Xiaoyang was full of praise for Yun Shishir, thinking that her acting skills were much better than Lin Ji's. Her aptitude was not bad and she was very photogenic. Hence, Sun Hua reported the situation to the higher-ups. At first, the higher-ups of Global Pictures gave an ambiguous reply, saying that they would discuss the matter before making a decision. Gu Xiaoyang really liked Yun Shishir and hoped to have a chance to use Yun Shishir in the future. Hence, he mentioned this matter to the higher-ups of Global Pictures. The Green Apple was going to be released soon. The box office was bound to be spectacular. Although Yun Shishir was a newcomer, her potential was immeasurable. After the release of The Green Apple, with the support of Gu Xingze and Lin Fengtian, Yun Shishir would definitely become famous overnight. At that time, Yun Shishir would definitely be more talked about than Lin Ji. In that case, Lethal Beauty would definitely benefit from The Green Apple. When the person in charge heard this, he was indeed very tempted. Indeed, although Lin Ji was a popular A-list actress, compared to Yun Shishir, Lin Ji's popularity was too high. After Lin Ji's debut, her reputation and popularity had been bountiful. However, the rumors about her were nothing. Yun Shishir's popularity soared as soon as she debuted. Even before the crew of The Green Apple released any behind-the-scenes footage, Yun Shishir's name would be on the hot search list. Hence, the higher-ups of Global Pictures decided to meet with Yun Shishir to discuss the casting of the role. Sun Hua then contacted Qin Zhou. Initially, when Qin Zhou learned that Global Pictures had invited Yun Shishir to a dinner party to discuss this matter, he hesitated for a moment before rejecting the invitation. Hence, Sun Hua thought of Mushi. When Mushi first received this news, she was overjoyed. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, was a little hesitant. Dinner party. Yun Shishir was inexplicably reminded of that dinner party where a young model had offered her body to the investors and producers in order to fight for resources. That unsightly scene was still fresh in her mind. Chapter 10:20. Mushi, reject it for me. Ah. The assistant was stunned. Sure, are you dumb? This is a rare opportunity. You must know that if you perform well and satisfy Worldwide's higher-ups, the production team of Lethal Beauty may decide to cast you. I have something on tonight, so I can't make it to the dinner party. Reject it for me. Yun Shishir said. Even though the assistant felt that it was a pity, she could not force the matter, so she gave him a tactful reply. When Sun Hua heard this result, he was so angry that he flared up. This Yun Shishir has just debuted, yet she's already putting on airs. Worldwide's higher-ups personally invited her, yet she rejected them without any hesitation. Is this appropriate? She's clearly acting like a big shot. When the news reached Worldwide's higher-ups, Li Dongliang, he gritted his teeth in anger when he heard that Yun Shishir was acting like a big shot and was not coming. Sun Hua gripped his phone tightly as he heard Li Dongliang's sarcastic remark. That woman's character is still a little high and mighty. Why? Is she looking down on Worldwide or me? She's putting on airs just because I asked her to have a meal with me. A taxi stopped steadily at the entrance of Global. Sun Hua got out of the car, smiled apologetically, and explained to the phone in a low voice, Mr. Li, don't be angry. Why get angry over a small actress? Don't you think so? On the other end, Li Dongliang sneered. Her. Why? I said that I wanted to treat her to a meal. Isn't that because I think highly of her? I've been in the industry for so many years, but I've never heard of such an actress. This Yun Shishir is a little arrogant. I think she's just looking down on me. After a pause, Li Dongliang continued, Sun Hua. How did you do your job? I asked you to treat her to a meal, and in the end? You gave me the cold shoulder. If word of this gets out, do you want Worldwide to become a joke? I think you're just messing with me. Sun Hua could not help but feel flustered and vexed. Mr. Li, look at what you're saying. How would I dare to trick you? The man snorted coldly and his voice was filled with anger. This Yun Shishir has really opened my eyes. In any case, I don't care how you do it. In any case, you have to get back at me. Even if she came, she had to come. He had to come even if he didn't want to. Otherwise, you can scram. When Sun Hua heard this, he felt even more guilty. He hurriedly said, Boss Li, don't be angry. It's all my fault. How about this? Let's set the dinner for tomorrow night. I'll definitely bring the person to you. At that time, you can do whatever you want. What do you think? The man suddenly laughed. Sun Hua. At least you know how to appreciate favors. It's tomorrow night. Don't let me wait too long. I don't want to waste any more time. You know that I don't have much patience. Before Sun Hua could speak again, he hung up the phone. Sun Hua was also angry that Yun Shishir did not give him any face. She had just debuted and acted in a movie. It had not even been released yet, but she was already acting like a big shot. Li Dongliang had noticed her and invited her to a meal because he thought highly of her. One had to know that this dinner was not for just anyone. Many female celebrities were lining up but did not get a turn. When it came to Yun Shishir, she rejected it with one sentence. What was the meaning of this? Chapter 1021. When Li Dongliang saw the photo, he was stunned. However, Sun Hua showed him the audition tape. Li Dongliang naturally did not care about the audition. He was a capitalist. Being involved in the film industry was just a branch of his investment. He did not care about whose acting skills were good. He only cared about the return of the investment. That was all. Chengguang Entertainment and Worldwide Entertainment jointly invested in Lethal Beauty. Chengguang Entertainment intended to promote Lin Ji and internally selected her as the female lead. Li Dongliang did not care who the female lead was, so he did not have any objections. Before this, in order to please Li Dongliang, Chengguang Entertainment specifically instructed Lin Ji to fight for Li Dongliang's approval. After being in the entertainment industry for 3 years, Lin Ji was not as ignorant as she was when she first debuted. Naturally, she knew the benefits involved. She was also very obedient and sensible. She accompanied Li Dongliang for 2 nights and served him well. Li Dongliang was naturally satisfied with her. Hence, the matter of the female lead could be said to have been decided. However, after Gu Xiaoyang strongly recommended Yun Shishir to Sun Hua and Sun Hua showed Li Dongliang the photo, he started to miss Yun Shishir. After being in the industry for so long, he had played with many women. There was the charming and enchanting Yan Bingqing, the peerless Han Yuyan, and the fresh and beautiful Yang Ni. Most of them were like products of the assembly line. They had the same face and were not distinguishable, let alone temperament. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, had a unique temperament. She was pure and refined. What made it even more unbearable was that she seemed to have a temperament that made one want to conquer her impatiently. The more pure and beautiful a woman was, the more men wanted to conquer her and the more they wanted to ravage her. This was probably the deep-rooted bad habit of some men. A man's desire to conquer was undoubtedly manifested in 2 aspects. One was his career. The other was his woman. Hence, Li Dongliang personally said that he wanted to treat Yun Shishir to a meal. He wanted to make a move on her. Who knew that Yun Shishir was not a person who knew how to play the game? She actually rejected him. However, Li Dongliang was indignant. Wasn't this clearly embarrassing him? He scolded Sun Hua badly. The next day, Sun Hua drove to Huanyu Tower and directly found the head of Huanyu's public relations department, Kong Xiaoqian. Speaking of Kong Xiaoqian, she was the head of Huanyu's public relations department. She was very young, but she had already become the head of the public relations department. How capable was she? That's not true either. Huanyu's internal relationships were intricate and complicated. Anyone who could occupy a place in Huanyu's upper echelons had a lot of connections behind them. Kong Xiaoqian was the daughter of the Kong Consortium. The relationship between the Kong Consortium and the Mu Corporation could be traced back to more than a decade ago. The cooperation between the 2 families was not shallow. Just the East Bay project that the Kong Consortium had just taken over from the Mu Corporation was worth several billion yuan. Kong Xiaoqian majored in public relations in university. After graduation, her father arranged for her to enter Huanyu's public relations department. A few months later, she was officially appointed as the deputy head of the public relations department. Now, he had been promoted to the level of a minister. After sitting down, Sun Hua went straight to the point and brought up this matter. Department head Kong, there's an artist called Yun Shishir in your company. Do you remember her? Chapter 1022. Kong Xiaoqian had gone abroad a few months ago to prepare for delivery. She had just returned not long ago and had not finished handing over the company's affairs. We've worked together for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen such an arrogant artist under Huanyu. She just debuted and acted in a movie, and she's already so arrogant. The movie hasn't even been released yet, and she's already acting like a big shot. How is this appropriate? Kong Xiaoqian fiddled with her beautiful nails as she smiled and said, Manager's son, calm down too. Don't get angry over a small artist, ha. It's not worth it. Director Li wants me to hand her over tomorrow. No matter what, I must bring Yun Shishir to him today. Chief Kong, give me a definite answer too. Don't make things too difficult for me. I heard that this Yun Shishir has just debuted, and the company has spent so many resources on her because she has some relationship with our young Master Mu. Who knows, maybe she's young Master Mu's pet. Kong Xiaoqian smiled sweetly as she spoke, as if she was a rich man's daughter. Pet was a jargon in this industry. It meant that she was a mistress kept by a big shot. Sun Hua smiled contemptuously and said, no wonder she's so ostentatious. It turns out that she's hooked up with young Master Mu. She just debuted and got the female lead role in director Lin's movie. She stole the limelight and was unrivaled for a while. It's all because of the unspoken rules. Since it's all because of the unspoken rules, why is she still so pretentious? Kong Xiaoqian was a little hesitant. She couldn't figure out the relationship between Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. Everyone said that she and young Master Mu had a close relationship, but to what extent? She didn't know. Sun Hua smiled faintly and asked word by word, Chief Kong, are you afraid that you won't dare to touch Yun Shishir because she's young Master Mu's woman? Kong Xiaoqian said, Manager's son, if she's really young Master Mu's woman, I won't dare to touch her at all. How is that possible? Young Master Mu would fancy a woman in the entertainment industry? Sun Hua snorted coldly. After all, even if she's Master Mu's pet, he's just playing with her. Young Master Mu was as precious as gold and jade. How could she be a match for him? One was in heaven while the other was on earth. Moreover, if she was really the woman that young Master Mu had his eyes on, how could young Master Mu allow his woman to mingle in the entertainment industry? Since you're in this circle, you should understand the rules of the game. Pausing for a moment, Sun Hua sneered coldly, since she likes to climb up high so much, then with this opportunity in front of her, why doesn't she hurry up and climb up the pole? If she served Boss Li well, she would be rewarded handsomely. Naturally, you will also get your share. Kong Xiaoqian was still a little hesitant when Sun Hua said, I heard that your father recently got the East Bay project, but he's still short of funds. If you can get Yun Shishir here, I'll talk to President Li. Maybe if Yun Shishir serves him well, he'll be happy and... His voice stopped abruptly, and he didn't continue speaking. Kong Xiaoqian naturally understood the hidden meaning in his words. Her red lips curled up slightly as she exchanged a glance with Sun Hua and smiled mysteriously. Chapter 1023. In the past, whenever her eyelids started twitching, it was always a bad sign. Qin Zhou had something to attend to. Before he left, he asked Yun Shishir to consider the role of the second female lead in Lethal Beauty. If she accepted the role, he would help her settle it. Yun Shishir was flipping through the script when Kong Xiaoqian suddenly walked in. Seeing that she was engrossed in reading the script, Kong Xiaoqian knocked on the door. The sudden movement startled her. Yun Shishir looked up. Seeing that it was Kong Xiaoqian, she smiled. Department Head Kong. Hello. Kong Xiaoqian walked straight to her and sized her up. Suddenly, she smiled and asked, Yun Shishir, are you free tonight? Yes, why? Kong Xiaoqian nodded and said, Tonight, you and Li Quan will go meet a client. Li Quan was the secretary of the Public Relations Department. Yun Shishir had met him once before. Meeting a client? Yun Shishir was a little hesitant. She was in a hurry to go home. But on the other hand, she didn't want to offend Kong Xiaoqian, so she was a little hesitant. Kong Xiaoqian sized her up and warned, this client is very important to the company. Yun Shishir, you have to remember that you're an artist under Huan Yu. So, you have to know what you're doing and what you're saying. Don't do anything that will cause losses to the company, understand? Kong Xiaoqian said meaningfully. Suddenly, she smiled strangely and said, that's good. This is a rare opportunity for you to train. Yun Shishir hesitated for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Yes, I understand. She suddenly asked, Department Head, what kind of client is it? An investor. I heard that he thinks highly of you and wants you to act in a movie he's investing in. Go and have a good talk with him. Oh. She tidied up the script and locked it in the drawer. Then, she left with Li Quan, who was waiting at the door. Li Quan obviously didn't expect that Yun Shishir would be attending the social event with him this time. He was a little stunned for a moment. He had met her face to face a few times. She was beautiful, smart, and very polite. She had just stepped into society, and her whole person was as white and clean as a piece of white paper. Even a drop of ink stain on her would be so dazzling. In his heart, he suddenly felt a little regretful. He looked at Yun Shishir and guessed a thing or two. It was a common occurrence to give away women in the Vanity Fair. In the past, he often brought artists to social events. Many female artists were beautiful and smart. Not only did they have a glib tongue, but they also knew how to please men. In order to climb up the social ladder, they were willing to suffer any kind of loss. Li Dongliang was a sly old fox with a bad reputation. He was greedy for beauty and had toyed with many artists. He had toyed with both men and women. He even toyed with little fresh meats and was quite fierce. The so-called discussions about scripts and movie contracts, in the end, were all about the bed. Sleep with him for a few nights. This was how resources came about. When Li Quan saw Yun Shishir's pure and clear smile, he felt indignant, but he couldn't bear to see her like this. She wasn't scheming at all. She probably didn't expect that Kong Xiaoqian was pushing her into the fire pit. Yun Shishir was only in her 20s. Li Dongliang was ruthless and liked to take advantage of young women. He also liked to play with women. How could Yun Shishir withstand his ravaging? Kong Xiaoqian was really ruthless. However, Li Quan only thought about it in his heart. Kong Xiaoqian's status was not ordinary now. How could he dare to go against her? Chapter 1024. The interests involved in this matter were too deep, so he dared not interfere. When Yun Shishir left the company with Li Quan, the latter went to get his car and asked her to wait for him at the entrance. Thus, she gave Yu Yu a call while she was at it. He did not pick up her 2 calls, and it was only on her 3rd call that he finally picked up. Yu Yu's voice sounded tired and hoarse. Hello. Yun Shishir could hear his tiredness and her heart ached for him. Hence, she said, Yu Yu, Mommy will be back late today. Rest early and don't wait for Mommy. How late will Mommy be back? Around 9:30 p.m. Oh. Yu Yu sounded a little unhappy as he said slowly, Mommy will be back late. Yu Yu can't sleep well. Yun Shishir was stunned for half a second before she gently said, Yu Yu, Mommy will definitely be back early, but Yu Yu, don't wait too late. Yu Yu replied, okay. Mommy must be back early. Wax. Wax. Yun Shishir hung up the call just as Li Quan drove the car over. Inside the car, the man held the steering wheel with a frown, deep in thought. Yun Shishir sat at the side, feeling nervous at the thought of having to socialize with those investors. She turned her head and sincerely said, Secretary Li, this is my first time meeting the investors. If I say something wrong, please remind me. The man looked at her with pity. Yun Shishir saw his strange expression and asked worriedly, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? I'm fine, Li Quan smiled absent-mindedly. Looking at her concerned expression, he suddenly felt a strong sense of guilt. Mu Shi had just returned to the company and was about to go home when she saw Sun Hua and Kong Xiaoqian walking out of the elevator as she passed by. She subconsciously hid at the side when she saw that it was Kong Xiaoqian. However, he heard Kong Xiaoqian's laughter. Manager's son, don't you think I'm being too cruel? Li Dongliang is a man with a wicked sense of humor. He's not any better than He Lingxiang. I heard that he has ruined a few young actresses. You must ask Director Li to be more tolerant of Yun Shishir. Don't swallow her whole. Mu Shi was so shocked that she almost let out a yelp. She quickly covered her mouth and held her breath as she heard Sun Hua say, Humph. Doesn't Yun Shishir like to climb up the social ladder? Although Li Dongliang has a strong family background, his net worth is not small. I'm not mistreating him by letting such a big branch fly. Kong Xiaoqian smiled. Sun Hua continued, this Yun Shishir is a stunner. It was no wonder that Mr. Li was so attentive to her. Who told her to be born with a foxy face? Men like this kind of woman. Kong Xiaoqian laughed and teased, ha ha. Who knows, Yun Shishir might even be able to squeeze out the first wife and fly up the social ladder. The 2 figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Mu Shi, who was hiding behind a corner, was stunned. She widened her eyes in shock and gritted her teeth in anger. D***MN it. Don't tell me that Kong Xiaoqian forced Yun Shishir to be a hostess. She had just gone out to ask around with her colleagues. That Li Dongliang was not a good person. He had a strong background and a bad character. She heard that he liked to play with women and that his methods were extremely cruel. If Yun Shishir were to fall into his hands, she would be eaten alive. Chapter 1025. She was about to leave when she suddenly remembered something and paused in her steps. If Kong Xiaoqian were to find out that she was the one behind this, she might lose her job. However, on second thought, Shusher trusted her so much and treated her as a close friend. If she were to abandon her now, that would be too much of a good conscience. Relying on her memory, she hailed a taxi to Xiangdi Walk and found her way to the villa's entrance. She pressed the doorbell and waited for a long time, but no one came to pick her up. Could it not be this villa? She did not remember wrongly, though. Was no one home? What should she do, then? If this dragged on, what would happen to Shusher? She could not help but shudder at the thought of Li Dongliang's wretched and sinister face. She was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Just as she was breaking out in cold sweat, she suddenly thought of Mu Yaja. She took out her phone, but she forgot that she did not have his number. She did not even have his office or secretary number. She was in trouble. She suddenly had an idea. She dialed the secretary's office number at Disheng's headquarters and then called the secretary's desk. The moment the call was picked up, she heard the secretary's respectful and polite voice. "Hello, this is Disheng Financial Group's secretary's desk. May I know who you are?" She cut her off and shouted, "I'm looking for Mu Yaja." "Secretary, She then hung up the call. She probably thought that she was a crazy woman. Who would call the CEO's name and go crazy? She widened her eyes in disbelief. This is too much. She hung up just like that. What kind of service is this? She must complain to Mu Yaja about them. Thus, she suppressed her anger and called the same secretary again. She suppressed her anger and said word by word, "Listen, don't hang up. This is an urgent matter, please listen to me first, okay?" The secretary's smile was a little stiff, but she still politely asked, "May I know who you are? Please transfer me to the CEO's office." The secretary was in a difficult position. "If we don't know who you are, it'll be considered a mistake on our part." She bit her lower lip and said, "I'm Huanyu's head of PR, Kong Xiaoqian." As soon as this name was announced, the secretary was stunned. His attitude took a 360-degree turn as he respectfully said, "Minister Kong, please wait a moment. I will transfer the call for you immediately." After waiting for the busy tone for a moment, the call was connected again. Mu Yaja's lazy voice came through, "Hello, what's the matter?" "Master Mu, I'm Yun Shusher's assistant, Mu Shi. We've met before." Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows, but his tone was still neither cold nor warm. "What's the matter?" She patiently recounted the entire incident. "It's like this, Imperial Hotel." Under the elegant light and the lingering smoke, the decadent sounds dyed the entire room with a bit of an ambiguous atmosphere. A woman with exquisite makeup was kneeling on the sofa. She was wearing a red dress that reached her hips and wrapped around her beautiful figure, revealing her curves. Without a doubt, this was a woman who was so coquettish that it was impossible for men not to be moved. She possessed a graceful and agile figure, her chest was full and snow-white, and her pair of fair and beautiful legs were half covered by her skirt. It was enough to make one's blood boil. Chapter 1026. Looking at the woman who was slowly approaching him, his eyes slowly narrowed. The woman lifted her wavy brown hair with one hand and slowly pulled down the straps of her shirt with the other, revealing her delicate and flawless shoulders. She lifted the wine glass, her red lips kissed the rim of the glass and took a small sip of the wine. Then, she turned around and knelt on the sofa. She held his chin and sealed his lips. With this kiss, the tip of her tongue drew the sweet wine into his mouth. The rich wine flowed between his lips and teeth. The woman unbuttoned his collar and reached her hand into his lapel inch by inch, gently teasing him. Under the retro wall lamp, Li Dongliang's eyes were very deep, very deep. There was no need to hide the depth in them. The corners of his mouth slowly curled up. His large palm caressed her slender waist and caressed it wantonly. The woman's delicate voice tugged at his heartstrings. Suddenly, he wrapped one hand around the back of her neck and bit her earlobe. The woman gasped in surprise and couldn't help but pout coquettishly. Her small hand pushed his muscular chest, but it seemed like an invisible temptation. It also seemed like she was resisting but welcoming it. Just when the atmosphere was at its most intimate, someone knocked on the door carefully. Li Quan walked in with Yun Shishir. Seeing such a hot scene in the private room, Yun Shishir was shocked and thought that she had walked into the wrong room. It wasn't until Li Quan gave a simple introduction that Yun Shishir realized that she had been ruthlessly sold by Kong Xiaoqian. What did she mean by meeting the investor, Li Dongliang? Wasn't he the executive from Universal Pictures who had asked to meet her 2 days ago? Could it be a hangmen banquet? However, since she was already here, she might as well take things as they came. Li Dongliang narrowed his eyes and sized up Yun Shishir. Although he had seen her photo, she was even more stunning in person. She was a beauty, a complete beauty. Her skin, even without any makeup, was still fair and flawless. Her beautiful eyes clearly didn't have any eyeliner, but they were so long and flirtatious, charming, and moving. Her nose was tall and straight, and her lips were soft and moist. She was natural and clean, but she had a kind of soul-stirring beauty. This type of beauty could not be replicated. It was unique, just like a poppy, dangerous yet beautiful. It possessed a type of fatal allure. Li Dongliang looked at the charming woman in front of him. He gently lifted her chin and looked at the delicate makeup on her face. She was a new artiste signed by Haina Entertainment Company. With the dazzling halo of the Miss Asia champion, she was now very popular in the circle. Right now, the model wanted to get herself a role in a blockbuster film invested in by Universal Pictures. Therefore, under the recommendation of her agent, she had this opportunity. How could she let this rare opportunity go to waste? Naturally, she had to perform well. But for some reason, when compared with Yun Shishir, this woman in front of him instantly paled in comparison. Although she was beautiful, her beauty was too rigid and monotonous, like the product of an assembly line, too empty. When he looked at Yun Shishir again, every inch of her facial features was extremely lively, especially her eyes, which were shining and captivating. Therefore, when Li Dongliang looked at the woman with heavy makeup on her face and glanced at the 2 layers of fake eyelashes, he couldn't help but feel disgusted. Suddenly, he lost interest and coldly pushed her away. Chapter 1027. The woman looked at him in surprise, but she understood that Li Dongliang was no longer interested in her. And she was no longer attractive to him. She lowered her head and bit her lip. She felt a little unreconciled and strange. It was going well just now, but she didn't understand what went wrong. At the same time, she was secretly angry at the woman who barged in. The atmosphere was just right, and it was about to go smoothly, but she ruined it. She couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. She helplessly tugged at his sleeve and blushed. She felt wronged and murmured, "Director Li, what's wrong?" Li Dongliang didn't even look at her. "Get out." Then my role, get out." The woman was unwilling, but she got up helplessly and left the room. Yun Shishir sat a little cautiously in her seat, occasionally glancing at Li Dongliang, who was sitting in the main seat. From the moment she entered the room, this man had been looking at her from top to bottom with a very strange gaze. That gaze made her feel very uncomfortable. It was as if he couldn't wait to peel off her skin and eat her bones clean. She looked at Li Quan for help, but she saw that he was still calm, but his smile was slightly unnatural. At the banquet, the topic originally revolved around the interests and cooperation of the 2 companies. Everyone sitting there was a knife hidden in their smiles. You could often distinguish 3 meanings from one sentence. They had dug a trap and were waiting for you to jump into it. This was one of the few occasions that Yun Shishir attended such events. How many of the faces on the table were real? Everyone seemed to have their own ulterior motives. After half a glass of wine, the smiles on the table gradually became a little impure. They began to talk about things that Yun Shishir had never heard of, such as how much a certain female star was paid for a night, or a certain socialite being kept as a mistress. Li Dongliang was even more slovenly when he opened his mouth. He said boldly, "Don't look at those female stars on TV. Who knows which sugar daddy they are having sex with in the middle of the night? Ha! That's all on the surface. But in reality, it's all dirty. Do you know that song Queen from Hong Kong? Do you know why Yang Shoucheng wants to support her?" Everyone was all ears. Li Dongliang snorted coldly. First, this woman and Yang Shoucheng's 8 characters are compatible. Secondly, Yang Shoucheng brought the 3 women to a dinner party and pointed to a pot of spring rolls on the table. He said that if anyone could break a spring roll on the plate with their legs, he would promote that person to a higher position. Hee hee. Later on, when she became famous, we all secretly called her spring rolls. Everyone was speechless. What a bad taste. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, was confused. She did not understand what Li Dongliang meant by clipping it off with your lower body. However, when he looked around again, he saw that everyone was secretly laughing in tacit understanding. He felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. This is really a bad taste, but it sounds quite interesting. Another producer laughed. In terms of bad taste, who can compare to He Ling? What do you mean? Chapter 1028. Ha! Isn't that so? I've played with Lin Haiyu before. She's boring. Li Dongliang frowned and pretended to be serious. But that young master is so infatuated with that Lin Haiyu. He wants her no matter what. So, his mother, the chairman of the board of directors, said that if she wants to marry into a rich family, she has to give birth to a son first. But Lin Haiyu's stomach is disappointing. She hasn't given birth yet. Ha! What do you know? The producer laughed. She can't give birth at all. She was played by those sugar daddies in the past. I heard that there was once a ridiculous incident. Tell me about it. Li Dongliang said with interest. One night, Lin Haiyu was rushed to the hospital. Apparently, the 3 of them were having a threesome with a director and a sugar daddy. I don't know how the 3 of them came up with the idea of stuffing a billiard ball into her lower body, so she couldn't take it out. Lin Haiyu said. That night, Lin Haiyu was sent to the hospital in a hurry. It was He Lingxiang's doing. Everyone thought that it was ridiculous and amusing at the same time, and they all laughed. Yun Shishir was the only one who sat stiffly in her seat. Her face was a little pale. What the hell is going on? Li Dongliang laughed. He's still being merciful. He Lingxiang has played with many young models before. Yun Shishir found these topics unpleasant. Gradually, she felt that she couldn't sit still, but she couldn't leave without permission. She didn't know how long it would take for this ridiculous banquet to end. She carefully tugged at Li Quan's sleeve, but the latter ignored her. Li Dongliang obviously noticed her little movement. He squinted his eyes and looked at her flustered face. He suddenly remembered Kong Xiaoqian's phone call before the banquet. Kong Xiaoqian said that the woman was a gift that she had specially sent to him as a filial piety. She asked him to have fun and play with her as he pleased. However, she was Qin Zhou's artist after all. She was afraid that it would be difficult to explain. She also mentioned the shortage of funds for the East Bay project. Naturally, Li Dongliang agreed. Kong Xiaoqian was overjoyed. She told him to have fun and hung up the phone happily. Li Dongliang was a capitalist. Naturally, he would not invest in a loss-making project for a woman. The East Bay project was won by the Mu Consortium and handed over to the Kong Consortium. Naturally, it was a golden resource that was guaranteed to be profitable. Li Dongliang glanced at Yun Shishir meaningfully. This woman was truly a stunner. Her appearance was delicate and beautiful, and her temperament was pure. What was even rarer was, he furrowed his brows. This woman in front of him actually bore some resemblance to Qingcheng. Speaking of this Li Dongliang, he was also one of Qingcheng's many admirers back then. At that time, Qingcheng's status in Beijing was similar to the status of Meng Lina in Asia. He had many admirers. Li Dongliang was naturally one of them. But speaking of Qingqing, he had both love and hate. Love was natural. Since ancient times, a gentle and graceful woman was a good match for a gentleman. Although Li Dongliang was not a gentleman, he hated Qingqing for being too aloof and arrogant. She was as beautiful as a blooming rose, but her entire body was covered in sharp thorns. With just a touch, one would be covered in wounds and could only be admired from afar. Chapter 1029. However, this rose did not lack followers like him. She was like a moon surrounded by stars. However, Mo Qingqing's personality was too prideful. Because of this, she didn't even bother to look at him. This caused Li Dongliang to feel bitter. At that time, he was just the boss of a small company. He was not rich and did not have the ability to compete with those big bosses of the upper class. However, when he was successful in his business, Qingqing suddenly disappeared from capital city. There was no news about her. Although the beauty of this girl before him couldn't be compared to Qingqing back then, her facial features and her charm were 70 to 80% similar to Qingqing. If she dressed up, they would be exactly the same. From the first time he saw her, if it wasn't for their age difference, he would have thought that this woman in front of him was Qingqing. It was common for business to send women as gifts. In this day and age, how many companies had a clean public relations department? Since it was Kong Xiaoqian who sent this woman to him, he did not need to pretend to be polite. He was very satisfied with this woman. Looking at her young face and thinking about her seductive posture in bed, he could not help but feel a little aroused. If it wasn't for his face, he really wanted to hastily end this boring banquet and bring this charming little woman along to have some fun. However, this woman did not seem to give him any face. She did not even touch the wine in front of her. No matter how he tried to persuade her, she refused again and again, claiming that she could not drink. Hee, this must be a joke. She could not drink. The entertainment industry was half a Vanity Fair. She said that she could not drink. It seemed that this woman wanted to avoid it. However, he was not in a hurry. He was the CEO of the Li Group. What woman could he not handle? These women were only interested in money and power. Give them some benefits, and they would get it. It was nothing more than checks, villas, luxury cars, jewelry. Women loved nothing more than these. He was not the same as before. With his wealth, there was nothing that she could not satisfy. Thinking of this, he smiled and asked, "Miss Yun, can you sing?" "No." Yun Shishir forced a smile. She thought to herself, "Do I have to report to you if I can sing? It's none of your business. Also, when will this drinking party end?" Li Dongliang saw that she was absent-minded and filled his glass to the brim. He raised his goblet at her and smiled. "Miss Yun, may I have the honor of toasting you?" Yun Shishir was a little anxious. She looked at the time and the sky outside the window. Seeing that this big boss wanted to propose a toast to him, he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. He pursed his lips and said apologetically, "Director Li, I'm sorry. I can't drink today." Isn't that a little inappropriate? Li Dongliang was a little dissatisfied in his heart. This little woman didn't even give him face. He squinted his eyes and rebuked, "You should at least have a drink. Don't ruin everyone's mood. How can there be no reason not to drink at the table?" Yun Shishir was extremely embarrassed. This Li Dongliang had put it this way. If she didn't drink it, she wouldn't be giving him face. Chapter 1030. She really couldn't drink. If she could hold her liquor well, not to mention Li Dongliang, everyone at the table would have forced her to drink until she passed out. At the thought of her not giving him face, Li Dongliang might be dissatisfied with her attitude. Or perhaps because of this, the film contract might fall through. Yun Shishir was so shocked that she was trembling all over. But when she thought of Mu Yaja finding out that she looked like the reincarnation of Satan after drinking, she suddenly felt her hair stand on end. On second thought, she still felt that she could offend Li Dongliang but not Mu Yaja. Thinking of this, she shook her head and said tactfully, half jokingly and half seriously, "Sorry, I really can't drink. If I can hold my liquor well, I'll give you a toast." Li Dongliang smiled and narrowed his eyes as he asked, "Miss Yun, you can't hold your liquor well?" Yun Shishir said embarrassedly, "Yes, I'll be drunk after one glass." Li Dongliang also smiled playfully and said cheerfully, "Miss Yun really knows how to joke. How can you hold your liquor so badly? If you can't hold your liquor well, you need to train more." "Train my ass. If you could train your liquor well, anyone could drink." Yun Shishir smiled as she cursed in her heart. She poured some tea and used it as a substitute for alcohol to give Li Dongliang a toast as an apology for her negligence. Li Dongliang smiled as he drank the white wine in his cup in one gulp. His lips curled into a meaningful smile. The show had just begun. At the table, Li Dongliang didn't mention a word about the film contract for Lethal Beauty. This wasn't something he could bring up with his status. When it came to roles, actors had to fight for it themselves. Yun Shishir didn't have the slightest intention of begging him. Li Dongliang couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Hence, he made a call and called Lin Ji over. Once Lin Ji entered the private room, she first looked around and respectfully greeted the few bosses and producers present. Once she saw Yun Shishir, she was full of doubts and silently suspected that this Yun Shishir was not here to snatch the role from her, right? He couldn't help but raise his guard. Hence, she giggled and walked toward Li Dongliang. She hooked her arms around his neck and sat in his embrace. "CEO Li, did you call me here because you missed me? Why haven't I seen you looking for me for so many days?" Li Dongliang smiled, his big palm caressed her buttocks, fiercely kneaded, and kissed her mouth. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, this kiss was really too much. However, the few people present seemed to be used to such scenes and did not show any expression of discomfort. Only Yun Shishir felt uncomfortable sitting on pins and needles. He felt especially embarrassed. Li Dongliang, on the other hand, seemed to have the intention of letting Yun Shishir see how other women worked hard to please him. On the other hand, Yun Shishir was not only indifferent, but she also seemed to be disgusted by such an erotic scene. She kept her head down, and no one knew what she was thinking. What on earth was this woman thinking? In the past, at such a dinner party, a woman like her would think of ways to please the sugar daddy so that she could get the female lead role. But look at her. She didn't even drink. Even after such a long time had passed, she didn't say anything. She was completely uninvolved. Even if she was pretending to be aloof, she should have had enough. He didn't believe that there was a woman in this world who was indifferent to glory and wealth. Chapter 1031. No matter how pure a woman was, like Lin Ji, she had only debuted for a year and was already tamed. However, Yun Shishir's temperament was very similar to Allure's. She had the same arrogance, and the same desire to conquer her. Lin Ji looked at Li Dongliang's eyes, which never left Yun Shishir, and suddenly felt a sense of crisis. She had spent so much effort to get the female lead role of Lethal Beauty. How could she allow others to snatch it away? Therefore, she tried even harder to please Li Dongliang. However, no matter how much Lin Ji tried to please him, the evil fire in Li Dongliang's eyes could not be quelled. Only he himself knew what his ambition was. Therefore, when the banquet ended, the representatives of Universal Pictures and Huanyu Entertainment signed the document, which meant that the banquet had come to an end. Li Dongliang had a good relationship with Kong Shaoqian. Before the banquet, they had already informed each other, so Li Quan naturally knew about it. After the banquet ended, Li Quan and Yun Shishir sent off the representatives of Universal Pictures as a courtesy. Li Quan said to Yun Shishir, "Shishir, you stay here and accompany Mr. Li. I'll go and settle the bill first." Yun Shishir opened her mouth and wanted to refuse, but Li Quan left the room without looking back and closed the door. She sat down dejectedly and looked at Li Dongliang cautiously. All the cells and nerves in her body were instantly in a state of alert. She did not know why, but from the first time she saw this man, she felt wary. Especially that pair of eyes, which kept staring at her, sizing her up again and again, as if he was staring at his prey. It made her feel really uneasy. Li Dongliang saw that her eyes were drifting back and forth, and she couldn't sit still. He suddenly felt a little strange. Did Kong Xiaoqian not tell this woman what to do? Or was this woman playing hard to get, pretending to be young and innocent? Li Quan left for a long time and did not return. At first, Li Dongliang was still chatting with her seriously, but gradually, he started to talk about dirty jokes. Yun Shishir couldn't sit still. She hurriedly said, "Director Li, I'll go and see if Li Quan has, why are you still looking at him?" "Li Quan has already left," Li Dongliang said with a smile. Yun Shishir was a little confused, but she didn't think too much about it, so she explained, "How could Secretary Li leave? He still has to send me back later." Li Dongliang said, "I'll send you back. I wonder if Miss Yun is willing to give me this face." Yun Shishir quickly waved her hand and laughed awkwardly. "How can I accept that? Why are you embarrassed? Miss Yun, please don't be so courteous with me. Or are you unwilling to give me face?" Li Dongliang's smile became more and more intriguing. Yun Shishir lowered her head. She was really unwilling to let him send her back. Not to mention that she didn't want to be too close to him, just the thought of sitting in his car made her feel uncomfortable and uncomfortable. But looking at his eyes, it seemed like she couldn't reject him. She thought about how she didn't give him face at the banquet. Now that he was kind enough to send her home, if she kept rejecting him, wouldn't she not even give him a way out? If she still didn't give him some face, she would really be going overboard. Thinking about it, even though she was really unwilling, Yun Shishir couldn't reject him anymore. Chapter 1032. Left with no choice, Yun Shishir could only nod in agreement. However, when she saw the unconcealable sharpness in his eyes, she felt her right eyelid twitch violently again. As for Li Quan, the bill was directly deducted from the company's account. Paying the bill was just an excuse for him to slip away. Kong Xiaoqian had already told him that Yun Shishir was a gift for Li Dongliang, so she reminded him to leave after the meal. As for Yun Shishir, she would leave her to Li Dongliang to enjoy. Li Quan could naturally tell that Yun Shishir was kept in the dark until now. She did not even know that this was not a dinner party but a shocking scam set up by Kong Xiaoqian. The so-called dinner party was just for her to accompany an old man and sell her to him. In this materialistic era, having money meant having power. Li Dongliang's net worth was huge. Although his foundation was not deep, he was still a prominent entrepreneur in the capital. He was ruthless and was someone Li Quan could not afford to offend. Although he felt sorry for Yun Shishir and even felt that it was unfair, he could only think about it in his heart. Not to mention Li Dongliang, even Kong Xiaoqian could crush him with a single finger. Just as he was thinking this, he walked out of the hotel and saw Mu Shi, who had just alighted from a taxi, rushing toward the hotel's entrance. He was stunned and narrowed his eyes curiously. He seemed to recognize this girl. She was Yun Shishir's assistant and had a good relationship with Yun Shishir. Seeing her rush through the door, he hurriedly grabbed her wrist. She was stunned. When she looked up and saw Li Quan, her eyes lit up and she quickly asked, "Secretary Li." "Just in time. I'm looking for Shishir. Did you see her?" He frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Why are you looking for her?" Mu Shi was not wary of him and said impatiently, "I overheard Mr. Kong saying that Yun Shishir is accompanying a client at the company's entrance, so I rushed over." "Where's Shishir? Where is she?" Li Quan pursed his lips and frowned. He asked curiously, "She's just an unknown artist in the company. It doesn't matter who department head Kong wants her to accompany. Besides, it's normal for artists to accompany people to dinner." Hearing this, Han Xiaoxiao felt very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but frown slightly as she retorted, "Don't tell me it's natural for celebrities to eat with others. Wasn't this a little too much? Besides, you also know that Li Dongliang." "Enough," he interrupted her impatiently. "Mu Shi, aren't you already off work? Why are you here?" Of course I'm here to find Shirshir. She craned her neck and peered inside before grumbling, I heard from Kong Xiaoqian that she made Yun Shirshir sleep with Li Dongliang. So aren't you worried? When Li Quan heard this, he was a little flustered. However, he pretended to be serious and said coldly, you can't talk nonsense like this. Be careful not to let department head Kong hear you and fire you. But I clearly heard it with my own ears. How can it be fake? With that, she wanted to barge into the hotel. I'm going to find her. He hurriedly pulled her back. Where are you going? Chapter 1033. Li Quan sighed. Stop fooling around, Mu Shi. Yun Shirshir has already returned to the company, you shouldn't stay here. Don't you still have to work tomorrow? Yun Shirshir was wanted by Li Dongliang, and Kong Xiaoqian had already established a good relationship with him. How could he let her take her away? Besides, how could she afford to offend someone like Li Dongliang? Really? Mu Shi looked at him skeptically. Did she return to the company? He nodded without a change in expression. Yes. What else could it be? She just left. Seeing that she was still doubtful, he half pushed and half pulled her toward the car park. Let's go. It's on the way, I'll send you home. She let him pull her arm in a daze, but she kept looking back at the hotel entrance, which was getting further and further away from her. She suddenly had a bad feeling. It was only when she got into the car and drove for a while that she realized that things might not be as simple as they seemed. She hurriedly shouted for him to alight. Of course, he was unwilling to stop the car. She started making a fuss in the car. Secretary Li, let me out. I'm warning you, Yun Shirshir's identity is not simple. Don't think that she's just an ordinary artiste. What? Are you threatening me? Li Quan narrowed his eyes, the look in his eyes dangerous. She snorted and puffed out her chest. What if I tell you that she's Chairman Mu's woman? The car came to a sudden stop. He widened his eyes in shock. What did you say? Yun Shirshir is Chairman Mu's woman, if she gets hurt. He. You should have heard of Chairman Mu's methods. Don't blame me for not warning you when the time comes. She was not to be outdone. He was skeptical. If she's really Master Mu's woman, why is she working in a place like showbiz? Mu Shi, being Master Mu's woman means endless glory and wealth. Mu Shi, where did you get this rumor from? What a joke. She snorted and mocked his ignorance. She did not care what he thought and immediately got out of the car. She slammed the door shut and said fiercely, Li Quan, if anything happens to Shirshir, you're finished. After saying that, she turned around and ran towards the hotel. Li Quan sat in the driver's seat in a daze, unable to regain his senses for a long time. At the same time, Yun Shirshir sat in Li Dongliang's car, feeling uneasy. Li Dongliang sat in the back seat. She wanted to sit in the front passenger seat, but Li Dongliang said it was against the rules. Thus, she had no choice but to sit in the back seat while trembling with fear. However, she deliberately kept a distance from him. She told the driver the address and sat close to the door. However, she saw that the road outside the car window was a little strange. She turned her head and reminded the driver, Mr. Driver, this is not the way back to the company. We should have taken that path. The driver shook his head and smiled, but he didn't say anything. Li Dongliang teased, don't worry, he knows what he's doing. Is Miss Yun afraid that we'll sell you out? Yun Shirshir shook her head and then lowered her head without saying anything. She fiddled with her fingers. The atmosphere in the car made her feel extremely uncomfortable. She really wanted Li Dongliang to leave her by the roadside and take a taxi home alone. As the car sped along the road, the scenery outside the window kept changing. She felt more and more that something was wrong. Chapter 1034. She sat up uneasily and leaned against the window to look around. She frowned and said, this is clearly going in the opposite direction of the company. Li Dongliang smiled eerily and said, of course not. Yun Shushu turned around abruptly and asked, "Then where are we going?" She looked a little flustered and incredulous. Li Dongliang clearly said that he would send her back. Why did he go back on his word now? What she couldn't understand was that she didn't know where he was taking her. "Mr. Li, just drop me off here. I'll take a taxi back." Li Dongliang said, "This place is so remote. How can you get a taxi? You're a girl. Isn't it unsafe?" Yun Shushu was angry. She didn't care about his status and raised her voice. "Mr. Li, you have to understand that you're the one who brought me to this so-called remote place. I clearly told you the company's address, but why did you drive to this place? What are your intentions? If you're really worried about me, it's useless to say all this here. Why don't you send me back to the company now?" Li Dongliang stared at her for a long time and suddenly laughed out loud. Yun Shushu looked at him strangely. She really didn't know what was so funny. "Hurry up and send me home." "What if?" Li Dongliang muttered slowly, "I don't want to." Yun Shushu widened her eyes and looked at the evil glint in his eyes. She suddenly reacted and quickly forced herself to calm down. She narrowed her eyes and asked with a cold smile, "What exactly do you want?" Li Dongliang raised his eyebrows disapprovingly. "We're already in the car. Are you still going to play dumb with me? Don't you know what you're here for? Didn't Kong Xiaoqian teach you?" Yun Shushu frowned. "What am I here for?" "Of course I'm here to discuss the film contract with you. But now that the dinner is over, don't you think you should let me go back?" She was not an idiot, nor was she a woman with a low EQ like Mu Yaja had described her to be. If she still couldn't tell what was going on, then she should really go for an IQ test. She could tell that the man in front of her was very interested in her. She could also tell that he had ulterior motives. She had already felt that something was wrong with him, but she didn't think too deeply about it. Firstly, during the banquet, he didn't make any aggressive movements or expressions towards her. Secondly, she believed that with Li Dongliang's status, he would never lack women, let alone a woman like her. Ever since the banquet had ended, all the things he had done to her had alarmed her greatly. Therefore, she tried her best to keep a distance from him. When she first entered the company, she had heard about some unspoken rules. She had also heard about drinking and sleeping with others. However, she had never thought that such a thing would happen to her one day. Sleep with him? Accompany my ass. That Kong Xiaoqian is too much. He clearly knew that it was such an improper dinner party, yet he still let her come. He obviously did it on purpose. Yun Shushu clenched her fists and said coldly, "Li Dongliang, I advise you to send me back. I'm not the kind of woman you think I am." Chapter 1035. "Oh. Then what do you want?" "Heh, I can give you anything." As he spoke, he slowly approached her like a wild beast eyeing its prey, his eyes radiating aggression. "Didn't you want the female lead of Lethal Beauty? I'll give it to you. How about it? You have to know that this role was originally reserved for Lin Ji. You saw how hard she tried to fight for this role. But as long as you serve me well, with one word from me, this role will be yours. How about it?" Yun Shushu kept retreating until her back was almost pressed against the car door. Her breathing quickened. "Or are you saying that one role isn't enough? What do you want? Just say it. Diamond? Villa? Or luxury car? It's not like I can't afford it. As long as you perform well." As he spoke, he reached out to touch her cheek. Yun Shushu waved his hand away and screamed, "Get lost. Don't touch me. Even if I want that role, I'll fight for it with my own abilities." Ha ha ha. As though he had heard the funniest joke in the world, Li Dongliang laughed sinisterly. "Abilities? You want to fight for it with your own abilities? Yun Shushu, you're too naive. Be good, I won't hurt you. On the contrary, I'll dote on you a lot." Li Dongliang leaned close to her and smiled even more greedily. "How about it?" Yun Shushu, Be my lover. I can give you everything you want. Wealth, status and even power. Whatever you want, I can give it to you. Get lost. Get lost. Yun Shishir pushed him away with both hands. I don't care about what you're saying. Get lost. Let me out of the car. Why? Not enough. Li Dongliang snorted coldly. The smile on his face suddenly disappeared and his face turned gloomy. Yun Shishir, I advise you not to be too greedy. I've never had much patience for women. When Yun Shishir heard this, she felt that his words were too harsh. She instinctively raised her hand and gave him a tight slap. Li Dongliang was stunned by this sudden slap. He covered his face and stared at her in a daze, as if he had never thought that this woman would have such guts. Yun Shishir also realized what she had done on impulse. She retracted her hand in a daze, held her burning palm, and bit her lip tightly. The scenery outside the window behind him kept changing. After a while, Li Dongliang finally regained his composure. However, he was so angry that he laughed. Yun Shishir, how dare you hit me? Yun Shishir raised her head and said word by word, Director Li, I think you misunderstood something. At first, I thought there was an important film appointment I needed to talk about. But, I didn't expect this to be what awaited me. Since that's the case, I don't think there's anything to talk about between us. My work is over. It's my honor that you're willing to send me home. But if you're not willing, you can just leave me by the roadside. As for the lover, diamond, villa, hee. Do I care? Even if I like it, Mu Yaja will give it to me. You don't have to do anything. Yun Shishir smiled and said, Mu Yaja, how many Mu Yajas are there in the capital? Although she didn't want to bring up Mu Yaja, she had no choice but to do so in order to protect herself. Chapter 1036. Only then did she nod her head in agreement. Li Dongliang suddenly grabbed her collar and pulled her to his chest. He gave her a hard slap and coldly reprimanded, Damn it! Are you toying with me? Mu Yaja? If you're really Mu Yaja's woman, why do you need to be in the entertainment industry? Bah! With your status, you still want to get close to young Master Mu? In your dreams. Why would he believe her words? Who was Mu Yaja? Mu Yaja was the leader of Disheng's financial group. What did Disheng mean? It meant that the stock market would tremble if Disheng stomped its feet. As Mu Yaja's woman, it meant that she was rich and powerful. Why would she need to be in the entertainment industry? What an international joke. It was not that he did not know Mu Yaja. How could he not know such a well-known name? Even if it's him, if he wants to gain a foothold in the capital, he must rely on the Mujia's protection. But what did this woman say? She claimed to be Mu Yaja's woman. To him, she was just a woman who was tossed aside after playing with her. Yun Shishir was caught off guard and fell onto her seat. She was in a sorry state. Before she could get up, she was pinned down by him. Unlike Mu Yaja, this man did not know his limits. His entire weight was on her. Yun Shishir was having a hard time bearing the weight of a middle-aged man. But more than that, she was filled with humiliation. She was an actress. It was because she loved acting and acting that she entered the entertainment industry. But why was it that in this man's eyes, an actress was a lowly status? Was she as lowly as a prostitute? She desperately slapped his shoulders with both hands and screamed in horror, Don't! Get lost! Get lost! What are you trying to say? What? Do you still want to use that brat to pressure me? A sinister and obscene smile appeared on Li Dongliang's face, causing one's hair to stand on end. He reached out his hand without any fear and pinched her soft waist. He laughed wickedly. Ha ha ha. Good. Even if you are Mu Yaja's woman, I'll treat you as his woman. Today was the perfect day. I want to have a good taste of Mu Yaja's woman. As he spoke, he pinched her chin and bit her neck. Yun Shishir cried out involuntarily. No matter how strong a girl was, she had never encountered such an uncontrollable situation. She was so frightened that tears almost rolled down her cheeks. She kept struggling and pushing him away. She bit and hit him on the shoulder like a wild cat that had gone mad. Even Li Dongliang could not withstand such a violent struggle. His face was hit many times, and it was burning with pain. He raised his head and slapped her angrily. Seeing that she was still restless, he really wanted to do her in the car. Yun Shishir was no match for him. She knew what was going to happen next. She screamed at the top of her lungs, "Li Dongliang! Don't tell me you want to offend Muyaja." Li Dongliang was stunned as he looked at her tear-stained face. She looked pitiful and aggrieved. But that gaze was still extremely sharp and even had a hint of provocation. It was simply an eyesore. In his eyes, Yun Shishir's domineering attitude was akin to that of a proud and spoiled canary. Did men not understand men? Chapter 1037. Li Dongliang guessed that Muyaja was only interested in her on the spur of the moment. With his status, he was used to seeing women who flocked to him like a flock of ducks. Once in a while, there would be an arrogant and unruly woman. Naturally, he would find it interesting and tease her a little. However, as time went by, his interest in teasing her faded. One must know that a man of Muyaja's status would not be interested in just any woman. This Yun Shishir was just a plaything to Muyaja. There were two popular sayings in the industry. No amount of flattery could compare to a single word from young Master Mu. It was hard to climb into the entertainment industry, but the hardest part was climbing into young Master Mu's bed. Did this woman really think that young Master Mu was sincere toward her? He suddenly inched closer to her face and laughed in a low voice. "You're just a woman. Why? Is Muyaja allowed to lay his hands on you and press you under his body, but I'm not allowed to sleep with you? You're just a woman. How precious can you be? I don't believe that Muyaja would go against me for a woman like you. I want you. Who dares to go against me? Damn it." As he spoke, Li Dongliang's movements became more aggressive. Yun Shishir clenched her fists in fear. She stared at him without blinking, afraid that he would do something scary. In this tense atmosphere, the chauffeur suddenly said respectfully, "Boss, we're here." Li Dongliang looked at her and snorted coldly. He pushed open the car door and grabbed her hair harshly, practically dragging her out of the car. Yun Shishir struggled all the way, muttering that name in her heart over and over again, "Muyaja, Muyaja." Late at night, a Bugatti Veyron stopped steadily at the hotel entrance. The car door opened, and a slender figure stepped out of the car. The man walked quickly into the hotel. The lobby manager walked up to him politely, and when he saw him, he immediately bowed respectfully with a humble smile on his face. "Master Mu." Muyaja didn't even look at him. He just asked coldly, "Where is he?" His voice was low and cold, revealing a dangerous and oppressive aura, causing people to be shocked. However, he couldn't figure out the meaning behind Muyaja's words. The smile on his face froze for 2 seconds before he asked carefully, "Young Master Mu, who are you talking about?" Muyaja's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. He grabbed him by the collar and said, "I'm asking you, where is she? Are you playing dumb with me?" The lobby manager was frightened. Even though he had seen many big scenes, he was still frightened by his aggressive appearance. He cried, "Master Mu, I'm really sorry. I really don't know who you're looking for." Muyaja sneered. "Very good." Just then, Mushi arrived. It was extremely difficult to hail a cab, so she practically ran all the way to the hotel. Li Quan said that Yun Shishir had returned to the company, but she didn't believe him. She called Yun Shishir's phone on the way, but it was turned off. She then called Yun Shishir's spare phone, but no one picked up. Only then did she realize that things had gotten out of hand. She anxiously rushed to the hotel and saw the tall figure standing in the middle of the hotel lobby. She was elated and quickly ran toward him. Chapter 1038. Muyaja turned around, and with a look the security guard understood and made way for him. Mushi ran to his side and asked while panting, "Where's Shusher?" The lobby manager was even more puzzled, but he did not dare to ask further. Mushi gritted her teeth and looked at him anxiously. "I'm asking you, where is she? Where is she?" The manager was about to cry. "I really don't know who Yun Shusher is." Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. "You don't know who she is? Then I'll tell you now, that's my woman." The lobby manager's face turned pale in an instant. He turned around and ordered the cashier to search for information on Yun Shusher. Mushi could not care less, though. Global Pictures and Huanyu Entertainment have a dinner today. Li Dongliang. You should know who he is, right? Have you ever seen him? At the mention of Li Dongliang, he remembered and hurriedly said with trepidation, "Mr. Li left just now. It seems that he took a woman with him, but Master Mu. I'm really sorry, I don't know where he took her." "How long has he been gone?" "It's been a while. It should be around 15 minutes. Mushi wanted to ask more, but from the corner of her eye, she saw Mu Yaja suddenly turn around and walk toward the entrance. She did not have time to think and hurriedly followed him. "Mr. Mu, think of something. Yun Shusher must have been taken away by Li Dongliang, shut up." Mu Yaja was feeling frustrated, and his tone could not help but become harsher. Mushi was so frightened that she trembled all over and did not dare to speak again. He took out his phone and dialed his assistant's number. The moment the call connected, he ordered coldly, "Find out Li Dongliang's current whereabouts. Now, immediately, immediately. Also, get the head of Huanyu's PR department to give me a call." "Yes. Master Mu." Mu Yaja hung up the phone and got into the car. She stood outside the car door with her hands clasped together. She was extremely worried, too, but she was still trembling with fear, not daring to get into the car. Mu Yaja glanced at her and rubbed his forehead with his slender fingers. "Get in the car." Mushi was stunned for a moment before returning to her senses. She nodded and got into the car. The car sped away. Along the way, the atmosphere in the carriage was extremely stifling. Mushi could feel the terrifyingly low pressure emanating from Mu Yaja's body, which could kill without leaving a trace. She didn't dare to speak, she didn't even dare to breathe. She carefully looked at his cold profile, his cold eyes looking straight ahead. The man's expression was cold. His cold and distant phoenix eyes were like an endless abyss, captivating people's souls. His angular facial features were hidden in the shadows, making him look even more exquisite. She secretly cursed. He must be extremely worried about Yun Shusher now, right? In this extremely quiet moment, the phone suddenly rang. Mushi was startled. Mu Yaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes and answered the call expressionlessly. "Hello. Chairman Mu. I'm Kong Xiaoqian." An extremely sweet voice came from the other end. "I didn't expect you to still remember me. Why do you have the time to think of me today?" Mu Yaja's lips slightly tugged into a half-smile. If Kong Xiaoqian were to see his current expression, she would definitely shudder. "How's your father's health?" Chapter 1039. Is that so? I'm afraid your father is going to lose this juicy piece of meat. Mu Yaja smiled without batting an eyelid. Kong Xiaoqian's laughter immediately stopped. She was confused and did not understand what was going on. Mu Yaja's sudden contact with her was, in fact, very surprising to her. After all, this man's status was so high and mighty. Meanwhile, she was just a lowly director of the public relations department. She had only met this man once at Huanyu's gala last year, let alone have a close relationship with him. Her first impression of him was that he was domineering, handsome, and heroic. However, she knew her place and knew this man could only be seen from afar. With her status, it was impossible for her to get close to him. She secretly wondered how she had offended this big shot. Just as she was feeling puzzled, Mu Yaja suddenly sneered and said nonchalantly, "As a dignified public relations representative of Huanyu, you actually allowed your employees to attend such a banquet. This makes me doubt your father's character a little. Disheng doesn't want to work with such a company either. In the future, the Kong Consortium will also be blacklisted." Kong Xiaoqian turned pale with fright. Before she could react, she heard Mu Yaja issue such a death sentence. She was stunned for a moment. Even as she racked her brains, she really could not figure out what he meant. Hence, she smiled stiffly and asked, "Chairman Mu, what do you mean by that? I really don't get it." "You don't get it?" Mu Yaja curled his lips. "You'll understand very soon." After that, he hung up the phone expressionlessly. Then he called his assistant and asked him to inform the board of directors about the cancellation of several contracts with the Kong Consortium. He also asked him to stop all the work he was doing and start preparing for the acquisition of the Kong Consortium. Not long after this order was issued, the Kong Consortium CEO, Kong Qixian, called him in horror. When he answered the call, a middle-aged man's desperate voice came from the other end with a trembling voice. "Chairman Mu. What the hell is going on? Why did you suddenly cancel the contract with the Kong Consortium? Elder Kong, we still have to ask your daughter about this matter. What exactly did she do?" Mu Yaja's lukewarm tone made Kong Qixian even more worried. His tone was still polite, but there was an irrevocable determination in his words. It seemed the Mu Consortium was determined to go against the Kong Consortium. Kong Qixian's hand that was holding the phone trembled slightly. He was no longer young and was once a ruthless businessman in the business world. When he was young, he did things swiftly and decisively. But now, he was old. In a few years' time, he would have to abdicate and hand over the massive Kong Consortium to his precious daughter. Although Kong Xiaoqian was usually arrogant and willful, she wasn't stubborn or mischievous. She was quite steady in her work. She had been with Kong Qixian since she was young, so she handled business matters in an orderly manner. He had always been at ease and comforted her. Kong Qixian had a daughter at an old age, and he only had one daughter, Kong Xiaoqian. He had doted on her since she was young, so he loved her very much. On this day, just as he was lying down to rest, Kong Xiaoqian called him while crying. She said incoherently, "Dad, Dad. I'm finished." Chapter 1040. After hanging up, Kong Qixian stood up from his desk and paced back and forth anxiously in front of the window. He then made a few more calls to urge Kong Xiaoqian to hurry home. The entire board of directors of the Kong Consortium was in a mess. How could the older directors sit still? They made one phone call after another to ask about what had happened and what the Kong Consortium had done to offend the Mu Consortium. When Kong Xiaoqian rushed home, Kong Qixian was sitting at his desk and smoking a cigarette sullenly after being infuriated by the directors. When he saw her return with red eyes, he slammed his palm on the table and asked with narrowed eyes, "Tell me, what did you do to offend Mu Yaja for him to deal with the Kong Consortium like this?" Kong Qixian had never lost his temper with her before, even if he did. Kong Xiaoqian was startled by his gloomy expression and could not help but take a step back. She stood quietly at the door with her head lowered and sobbed. Kong Qixian was already frustrated to begin with. When he saw her sulking and crying, he got even more anxious. He raised his voice and said, "What are you crying for? Are you still afraid to admit the trouble you caused?" Kong Xiaoqian still did not dare to speak. She kept wiping away her tears, and her exquisite makeup was in a terrible state. More than half of it was ruined and she looked extremely ugly. Kong Qixian's expression turned even uglier. He rebuked her angrily, "Say something." "I don't know either." Kong Xiaoqian looked up and said, I just think I've done something stupid. Sun Hua came to me and told me that if I sent Yun Shishir to Li Dongliang's side, Li Dongliang would be able to inject funds into the East Bay project to make up for the shortfall. But how could I have known that Yun Shishir would have such a background? Kong Qixian was so angry that he was glaring at her. "I don't want to listen to such useless things. Tell me, What did you do to her? Tell me. Kong Xiaoqian sobbed and told him everything that had happened. This infuriated the old man. He clutched his chest and fell back into his chair. He said bitterly, I was planning to hand the Kong Consortium over to you because I thought highly of your capabilities. You're also the only heir of the Kong Consortium in the future, so I was confident that I could entrust it to you. But you did this to me. I let you join Huanyu so that you can gain more experience. But you actually did such a heinous thing. Xiaoqian, Xiaoqian, you're usually very steady in your work. Why are you so muddle-headed this time? She's so young, yet she's learning from others in the business world. I think you're a complete scoundrel. Kong Xiaoqian was already feeling guilty. She stood in front of the table with a red face and didn't say a word. Kong Qixian patted his chest and finally managed to catch his breath. He frowned and continued, Who is Li Dongliang? Why are you still hanging out with that old thing? Don't you know what kind of person he is? He likes to mess around. You know how much he likes to play with women. In this industry, who doesn't know that he has played with a few female celebrities? You clearly knew, yet you still sent her over. When did your heart become so vicious? Would that woman still be fine in his hands? What are you waiting for? Kong Xiaoqian was still rooted to the spot. Kong Qixian glared at her and said angrily, What are you waiting for? Chapter 1041. Speaking of Li Dongliang, the big boss of Universal Pictures, he had played with many actresses. More than half of the artists and singers in the company had affairs with him. Everyone in the industry knew that there were not many artists who were packaged by Universal Pictures that were clean. This was a transparent rule within Universal. However, after seeing so many women with heavy makeup, Yun Shishir, who was pure and refined like a lotus flower, immediately aroused his desire to conquer her. Yun Shishir gave people a forbidden temptation. This kind of girl could not only make men want to conquer her, but also make them feel pity for her. It was exactly his favorite style. When he thought about how this kind of woman was taken by someone else, he was not without unwillingness in his heart. When he thought about how that man would be so close to her body and enjoy this sweet beauty as he wished, his heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat's paw. He could not help but feel angry and jealous. It was not that he had never seen a woman more beautiful than her. However, this girl had a bewitching temperament. That pair of flirtatious eyebrows, just a look, was extremely beautiful. Just thinking about that white and graceful body and those two slender and beautiful legs made Li Dongliang's heart itch unbearably. The tightness in his lower abdomen was extremely uncomfortable. After throwing Yun Shishir into the bedroom and locking the door, Yun Shishir immediately kept a safe distance from him. He narrowed his eyes and sized her up. The room was pitch black. The moonlight slanted in from the window and enveloped her whole body. She clenched her teeth tightly and frowned. Supporting herself with her arms, she pulled herself up. Looking at Li Dongliang who was closing in on her, she could not help but step back vigilantly. Her breathing was a little hurried. You're not allowed to come over. Yun Shishir shuddered. We're already here, and your little mouth is still so fierce. See how I'll deal with you later, See how I'll tame this woman later. Li Dongliang stared at her anxiously, but his hands did not stop moving. He took off his clothes without asking. In a flash, the middle-aged old man in front of her was half naked. It had to be said that the old lecher in front of him was really a bit of a blemish. He had a head of sparse hair and a square face. His cheeks were slightly sunken, but his eye bags were extremely full. Following his line of sight, his figure was really unsightly. His body was so fat that it oozed oil, and he had a beer belly. There didn't seem to be any muscles on his body. Yun Shishir was shocked and her mind went blank. Looking at Li Dongliang, she really didn't want to think in that direction. But even the dumbest person would know what was going to happen next. He was trying to force her to submit. Yun Shishir was furious. She was being sent here and there like a cheap commodity. She had no dignity at all. She bit her lip, only to see the man walking towards her quickly. In an instant, her heartbeat seemed to have stopped, and her heart was stuck in her throat. She felt like she was suffocating. "Don't come over. Don't come any closer." She almost screamed out loud. Her heart trembled, and at the same time, she took a step forward. Almost entirely relying on her remaining mental strength and rationality, she jumped up from the bed like a cat and rushed towards the door with large strides. Chapter 1042. The belt left a bloody mark on Yunshishir's arm. She stumbled a few steps back and accidentally knocked over a chair, falling to the ground. Her back and the back of her head collided violently with the cold and hard marble floor. Accompanied by a jolt of pain, the world spun before her eyes. "Damn it. Stupid B***tch, I gave you some color and you really dared to open a dye shop for me? Huh?" Li Dongliang scolded her with vulgar words and approached her step by step. As he anxiously tore off his clothes, a lewd smile appeared on his face. In a fit of anger, he took off his suit pants and pounced on her like a hungry wolf. Yunshishir screamed and rolled on the ground in a panic to avoid him. She tried to get up from the ground in a flurry, but he grabbed the ends of her hair and yanked her back violently. A numbing pain came from her scalp. That ferocious strength was not at all merciful. She felt as if her scalp was about to be peeled off. Yunshishir let out a low cry as tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Li Dongliang hugged her shoulders and flipped her over, pressing her under him. He sat on top of her and chuckled. His rough palms patted her cheeks forcefully, his words filled with extreme dissatisfaction. "Yunshishir, I'm telling you, today, I'm definitely going to have you. Don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Do you think that you can mix in this industry as you wish and that you can reach the heavens in a single bound just because you have a pretty face? Ha! Don't be too naive. Once you're in this industry, how will it be up to you? Let go of me. Let go of you. Ha! What kind of dream are you having?" Li Dongliang stared at this exquisitely sculpted face. His large palm roughly kneaded her waist, and the smooth and tight feeling made him relax his brows in satisfaction. Damn, her skin was not just soft and supple. It really wasn't a waste of all the effort he had put in to get this girl. Yunshishir's hands were firmly pressed against his chest as she stared at him angrily. Her pair of watery eyes were misty, giving her a seductive look. Li Dongliang's interest was piqued when he saw the hostile look on that face. He narrowed his eyes and smiled. "What? You're not willing? What? Yunshishir, don't tell me you're at a disadvantage by following me?" As he spoke, he reached out to grab her collar and tore it apart forcefully. Yunshishir was shocked. She held his hand tightly, not letting him have his way. During the tugging, her nails scratched the back of his hand. Li Dongliang shuddered in pain. In a fit of rage, he waved his hand and gave her a tight slap. The strength of this slap was definitely not light. Yunshishir's face was slapped to the side, and the corner of her lips knocked against her teeth. Under the dull pain, there was a cut, and the taste of blood filled her mouth. She was embarrassed, angry, in pain, and scared. The tip of her nose was slightly sour, but she stubbornly refused to shed a single tear. Li Dongliang was also very angry. His face did not look pleasant as he choked her neck. The lust in his body was screaming, but he could not vent it out. This made him even more irritable. Chapter 1043. Yunshishir's mouth was wide open. With her throat choked by him, she was suffocated and unable to speak. He bit down hard on her jade-like earlobe. His hot breath blew onto her neck, causing her cheeks to turn red. Her entire face was boiling hot. His large palm started to touch her body up and down unruly. The soft texture immediately made his body tense up. Yunshishir struggled with all her might and used all her strength to push him away. However, although this Li Dongliang didn't train well, he was still a man after all. How could Yunshishir compare to his strength? With his entire body's weight, how could she push him away so easily? No. Let go of me. No. Yun Shishir shouted in humiliation as she hit his shoulders with both hands. Her voice was already hoarse. Li Dongliang obviously wouldn't listen to her. A lewd smile appeared on his face as he caressed her waist wantonly. His lower abdomen was tightly pressed against hers as he impatiently moved towards her lips. Yun Shishir suddenly turned her head and avoided him pathetically. It was as if her entire soul had fallen into an endless black hole and she was unable to extricate herself from it. Li Dongliang was very unhappy with her avoidance and sneered sarcastically. You're not a virgin anymore. Why are you being so pretentious? Yun Shishir pursed her lips and shook her head. However, her pair of eyes stubbornly widened. Her eyes were bloodshot and misty, but there was a different kind of charm to them. This was a woman who could easily arouse a man's desire to conquer. A woman who could make a man's heart ache and pity her. Yun Shishir, follow me. I can give you everything you want. If you follow me, you can debut and release a film. I'll use all my resources to support you. I'll pave the way for you. Whatever you want, you can ask me and I'll satisfy you one by one. How about it? If you follow me, I'll dote on you and love you well. Be my woman. Don't reject me again. As he said that, he bit her cheek and kissed her crazily. This girl was, of course, a bewitching potion. She could easily bewitch a man to the point that his soul was turned upside down. The more he thought about it, the more he lost control of his movements. Thus, he anxiously tore open her clothes and touched her waist that wasn't considered plump. His tongue licked and kissed her cheeks, invading her bit by bit. Their bodies were intimately pressed together, causing his body to become more and more excited. With a hiss, he sucked in a breath of cold air. His breathing gradually became heavy, and his eyes became more and more heated. Chi la! Chi la! With a tearing sound, Li Dongliang violently tore at her clothes. In the blink of an eye, her snow-white shoulders were exposed to his eyes. His large palm fiercely kneaded her waist, the corner of his mouth holding an extremely lustful smile. The man madly nibbled on her shoulder, infatuatedly murmuring, "Ching-cheng, ching-cheng ah." Yun Shishir was completely stunned by his aggressive actions. She anxiously pushed him away, gritting her teeth as she tried to push him away. Her rationality was about to be worn out. She began to put down her pride, put down her dignity, and softly begged, I beg you to let me go." The fire in Li Dongliang's body was burning vigorously, so why would he care about her words? It was just a woman, he really didn't want to waste too much effort. There was no need to be merciful. Now that the girl of his dreams was lying under his body, how could he let her go? Chapter 1044. To put it nicely, each and every one of them was a big-name celebrity, but behind their backs, they were all groomed by others. Which of them relied on their own power to make a name for themselves? To put it bluntly, in Li Dongliang's eyes, those were all high-class prostitutes. Even if they were extremely clean and pure when they first entered the industry, after some time, how many of them were pure and untainted after entering this big dirty vat? As he thought about it, his movements became more nimble. Just like that, he pressed her firmly onto the ground and carelessly kissed her cheeks. However, he saw that her head kept turning and dodging. He did not linger and unbuckled his belt with one hand. With a swing of his other hand, he took off his pants and started to tug at her pants, intending to cut straight to the chase. Yun Shishir was so sensitive that she shuddered. Looking down, she saw that he had exposed an ugly part of himself. She almost wanted to vomit. Her last bit of rationality was completely worn out. Almost crazily, she bent her knees and hit his crotch hard. Ouch! The most vulnerable part of a man was hit hard. Li Dongliang was in so much pain that he immediately arched his back. His body tilted and he stiffly fell to the ground. Yun Shishir took a few steps back and saw that he was pointing at her with a trembling finger. His face was full of disbelief. It was as if he had never expected that this little woman would be so chaste. After a while, he spat out a few words forcefully, as if squeezing each word out from between his teeth. Damn it. Stinky B***tch. Yun Shishir stood up shakily. Her blood-red eyes stared at him fiercely, as if she was afraid that he would pounce on her at any time. Her face was full of vigilance. As she watched him, she retreated in the direction of the door. With one hand, she turned the doorknob, but she could not open it. She just remembered that the door was locked from the inside and needed a key card to unlock it. Yun Shishir rushed into the living room again. The man was still lying on the ground. His body was twisted in a strange position, as if he was in extreme pain. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. As he cursed, he glared fiercely at her. The lights were a little dim. She scrambled around the living room to look for something. Behind her, Li Dongliang saw her rummaging through the cabinets as if she was looking for something. He panted and laughed. Ha! Are you looking for this? Yun Shishir turned her head impatiently, only to see Li Dongliang slowly take out a blue access card from his pocket. Her pupils constricted as she shouted, "Give it to me. Have you forgotten? What did I say?" Li Dongliang struggled to stand up and said word by word, "Don't even think about walking out of here tonight." After saying that, he took out a medicine bottle from his clothes. Aphrodisiac. After being frightened by her just now, they had all wilted. After all, at a certain age, one's energy was not as good as before. After taking 2 pills, Li Dongliang's face was flushed red and he was in high spirits. Damn, this woman is really hard to deal with. However, he loved this kind of tone. The harder it was to find a wild animal, the easier it was to arouse his desire to conquer it. Thinking of this, he walked closer to her step by step, just like a wild beast waiting for an opportunity to capture its prey. Yun Shishir retreated step by step until she was forced into the dining room. From the corner of her eyes, she saw the scissors on the counter. Her fingertips started to tremble and there was a tinge of hesitation and struggle in her eyes. Chapter 1045. From this angle, Li Dongliang couldn't see clearly what she was doing and guessed that she wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Instead, he had forced her into a corner and she had nowhere to escape. Hence, he pounced towards her. Yun Shishir turned pale with fright as she gave a low cry and turned around, aiming the scissors at him. "Don't come over." Li Dongliang stopped in his tracks as he looked at the weapon in her hand which was glowing with a cold light and suddenly laughed. "Her. Are you threatening me? Using scissors? Do you dare? Do you dare to stab me?" Li Dongliang was certain that she wouldn't dare to do such a foolish thing as he pressed on. Yun Shishir's hands were trembling and her lips were white as she looked at him warily as she screamed, "Don't come over. Don't come over." Li Dongliang kicked her hand. Yun Shishir felt a pain in her wrist and the scissors fell to the ground. Li Dongliang immediately went forward and grabbed her hair and gave her a slap. "Pa!" Yun Shishir let out a muffled groan as she stumbled and leaned against the wall. Her body slid down along the wall weakly. Li Dongliang pounced on her and grabbed her by the collar. She struggled to prop up her exhausted body and slowly raised her face. Her extremely pale face was half-stained with tears. Her pair of moving and beautiful eyes were dim and dull like agate jade covered in dust. Blood trickled from the corner of her lips. Her miserable appearance was like that of an injured animal, which could not help but arouse one's pity. Li Dongliang held her face and pinched hard with his fingernails, leaving a few dark red blood marks on her face. Yun Shishir sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain and suddenly regained some consciousness. She opened her eyes and stared back fiercely as she gritted her teeth and said, "Li Dongliang. You bastard. Scum. Quickly let me go. Let me go. Scum. Ha. Yun Shishir, don't you know the rules? I'm telling you clearly that I'm going to have you today." Li Dongliang waved his hand and gave her another slap. This time, he exerted a lot of force. Yun Shishir only felt that her brain was in a mess from this slap. Her temples throbbed faintly, and tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. She sniffed stubbornly and tried her best to suppress her tears, but she couldn't hold them back and started sobbing softly. I beg you, I beg you. Let me go. I beg you. Yun Shishir was terrified, and the situation in front of her made her unable to extricate herself from it. Even such a stubborn woman had to put down all her dignity and pride as she cried and begged again and again, don't touch me, I beg you. Seeing her cry like this, Li Dongliang felt even more irritated. This woman was really not enlightened enough. Do you think that kid really likes you? You must be dreaming. Li Dongliang grabbed her neck and moved closer to her face as he sneered, you're just a plaything by his side. Do you think that he likes you? A man like Mu Yaja is so high and mighty, how can he fall in love with a woman like you? Do you think that it's so easy to enter the Mu family? Do you believe that even if I kill you, he won't even blink for you? Chapter 1046. Yun Shishir felt a stab of pain in her heart. She knew that Mu Yaja's status was high, his wealth was comparable to a country's, and he was also a man of striking appearance. She knew even more clearly that with her background, how could a woman like her be compared to him? However, there was still a faint trace of hope in her heart. She wanted to get closer to him at all costs, just a little bit closer, so, she wanted to become more outstanding, to become a woman who was worthy of him. That was all. She had once thought that Mu Yaja was only interested in her on a whim. Perhaps one day in the future, he would suddenly feel sick of her and lose interest in her. Then, he would coldly push her out of his world. But then she thought of how he cared for her, and how he doted on her. Although it was as beautiful as a bubble that would burst at the slightest touch, it really existed. Holding hands with him made her feel like she had the whole world. He was so important to her. Then, she would be equally important to him. Yun Shishir's voice was hollow and broken. I'm very important to him. He's my man, and the only man in my life. Li Dongliang narrowed his eyes dangerously, and he was furious. What could Mu Yaja give her that he couldn't give her? How could this woman be so tactless? She was already a woman in society, yet she was still so insensible and so aloof. It really made him feel disgusted. But, looking at her face, Li Dongliang's heart was stirred. This was a face that he had yearned for so many years. Every time he thought of Mu Qingcheng, whom he had pursued for so long, and then looked at this beautiful face, he couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. The face in his mind slowly overlapped with Yun Shishir's face in front of him. Li Dongliang only felt his head heat up. His eyes were bloodshot as he held her face with both hands. As though he hadn't touched a woman for decades, he lowered his head and kissed her crazily. Yun Shishir's heart skipped a beat as she felt his hot breath and looked at his face that was just inches away from hers. Her whole body trembled violently as she clenched her fists and punched his shoulders. She screamed, "Let go of me! Let go of me! Scram! F***ck, bitch, don't be ungrateful." Li Dongliang was irritated and had nowhere to vent his lust. Seeing that this woman was resisting so fiercely, he was instantly enraged. No one liked to dilly-dally on such matters. Slow movements were the most torturous. His heart was anxious, and he grabbed the hem of her skirt. With a little strength from his wrist, he tore it open. Hearing the sound of clothes tearing, Yun Shishir was immediately scared stiff. Her hands frantically pulled at her clothes and desperately pushed him away. She cried and begged in a hoarse voice, "Scum! Li Dongliang, you scum! Damn it! Behave yourself! I don't believe that I can't handle a woman." Li Dongliang was so angry that he lost control and pushed her to the ground. He turned over and straddled her body. His hands groped her body unruly, roaring like a beast in heat. Yun Shishir cried out in pain. She only felt that this push made her back and the back of her head hit the ground. It was as if her entire soul was going to be knocked out. She gasped in pain and struggled to open her eyes. From the corner of her eye, she saw the scissors that had fallen to the side. Her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 1047. Ah! A blood-curdling scream reverberated through the huge room. The ambulance and police cars were parked by the entrance, and the sirens attracted everyone's attention. Yun Shishir sat on the sofa in the living room expressionlessly, staring blankly at her blood-stained hands. Her eyes were empty, and her shoulders were slightly trembling. A strong sense of guilt rose in her heart. Looking at her blood-stained hands, she felt that they were too dirty. So she took the towel that the manager had handed to her and wiped her hands vigorously. A group of uniformed police officers questioned a few of the villa's servants and understood the general situation. Then they walked up to her. "Excuse me, are you Yun Shishir?" Yun Shishir lifted her head sluggishly and saw a few uniformed police officers coldly sizing her up with their heads lowered. She nodded blankly and couldn't help but furrow her brows. "You're suspected of intentional assault. Come with us." She pursed her lips, lowered her eyes, put down the towel, and slowly stood up. It started raining late at night, and it got heavier and heavier. It became a downpour, and the bean-sized raindrops hit the window, making pitter-patter sounds. When Yun Shishir got out of the police car, she was drenched from head to toe. The rain hit her face and it hurt. She slowly looked up, and the cold rain fell into her eyes drop by drop. Her eyes were so bitter that they hurt, and the wound on the corner of her lip started to hurt because of the rain. Looking at the beautiful police station in front of her, she suddenly stopped. In the cold rain, her heart sank bit by bit with despair. At that moment, she suddenly felt very tired, both physically and mentally. Seeing that she was standing motionless in the rain, the auxiliary police officer reached out to push her. Yun Shishir stumbled and fell to the ground. Yun Shishir looked down blankly and slowly supported herself with her arms. Seeing that she had fallen, the auxiliary police officer couldn't help but walk over in annoyance. He sighed and helped her up, saying loudly, "I've seen people with weak bodies, but I've never seen someone as weak as you. Why did you fall with a push? Can't you stand firm? If you want to get caught in the rain, can you not drag us down with you? Don't waste time. Hurry up and go to the police station." With that, the man pushed her shoulder forward. Yun Shishir said softly, "I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do it on purpose. Whether you did anything wrong or not, we'll have to investigate thoroughly before we know. It's not up to you to decide. Quickly go in. Let me make a phone call." "Make a call? Why are you calling? Who are you calling when the interrogation hasn't started yet? Go in." After saying that, he grabbed Yun Shishir's shoulder and pulled her in. In the police station, Yun Shishir sat quietly on the sofa. She hugged her shoulders and shivered. Her expression was so numb that there was no expression on her face. She looked like a lifeless puppet. Mo Chingon walked over with a notebook and a pen. He placed a cup of hot tea in front of her and turned to sit down at the table. He was the captain of the police force and the person in charge of this case. Yun Shishir glanced at him. Chapter 1048. Seeing her looking at him up and down with eyes full of doubt, Mo Chingon smiled and raised his head to look at her. Yun Shishir was startled and unnaturally withdrew her gaze. With his status, he had come into contact with all kinds of women. There was no lack of flirtatious women, pure and cute women, and even sexy and charming women. But he really didn't know how to define the girl in front of him. In terms of cuteness, she had a very sexy figure. Her eyebrows were arrogant and her eyes were narrow and flirtatious. They were very charming, but there was a pure and innocent look in her eyes. She sat quietly on the sofa with a white blanket draped over her. Her whole body was wet, and her seaweed-like hair was soaked. She was in a sorry state. Her right cheek was red and swollen, and the corner of her lips was bleeding. There were some bruises on her slightly exposed shoulder, and her clothes were disheveled. There was a tear on her collar, and it looked like she had been raped. He roughly understood the situation from the servants in the villa. He also learned that this girl seemed to be a newcomer in the entertainment industry. He didn't pay attention to the entertainment industry, so he naturally didn't know who she was. She was the one who called the police, so it could be considered a surrender. He learned from the servants that this girl was dragged all the way to the villa by Li Dongliang. At that time, she seemed to be unwilling. Not long after, she ran downstairs with hands full of blood to call the police. The unspoken rules of the entertainment industry? That was his guess. In the entertainment industry, sending women to sleep with producers, big bosses, or investors was a common thing. In this day and age, if a newcomer didn't have anyone to support her, she could only rely on explosive scandals and gimmicks to fight for her position. Most of the girls who just entered the industry weren't famous. In this kind of situation, naturally, no management company was willing to take the risk to invest in packaging her. Of course, if you were willing to pay a price in exchange, then it was a different story. He had encountered this kind of situation before, but most of it was consensual. A few years ago, a small model rushed to the police station to report a case. She accused a famous investor of raping her and asked the police to open a case. This case was handled by another colleague of his. Of course, there was nothing wrong with that. Later, due to pressure from certain parties, this matter was quickly suppressed and left unsettled. As for the unknown model, she was later promoted to a first-tier female artist. Now, her career was in full swing and she was very popular. In this kind of materialistic era, how could a small commoner fight against those with power and status? Seeing him looking at her without restraint, Yun Shishir looked down uncomfortably. Her delicate and beautiful face couldn't hide her tiredness. She slowly held the teacup, and the warm tea drove some of the chill. She took a sip, but the bitter taste of the tea, of course. Yun Shishir pursed her lips. She had never tasted tea leaves before, so she was not used to its taste. Mo Chingan looked at her again and asked, "You don't look like an adult. How old are you?" Chapter 1049. What's wrong? Seeing that she didn't say a word, Mo Chingan glanced at her and smiled faintly. Are you so nervous that you forgot how old you are? Don't be afraid. This is the police station, not a wolf's den. Yun Shishir licked her dry lips and answered slowly, 24 years old. Mo Chingan was startled. I really couldn't tell. I thought you were a student. Yun Shishir was embarrassed. Even though Mo Chingan was trying to ease the tense atmosphere, Yun Shishir's face was still stiff. Come on, tell me what happened and what happened. She lowered her head and was silent for a while. Then, she suddenly opened her mouth and told him everything that happened after she entered the room. During the process, Mo Chingan listened and took notes at the same time. From time to time, he would raise his head to look at her face. Surprisingly, there was no sign of panic or fear on her face. On the contrary, compared to her expression when she first stepped into the station, her face was very calm. He had to admit that this was a beautiful girl. At that moment, she lowered her head and calmly narrated. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her thick eyelashes were long and curly. When she spoke, she trembled slightly. It was really pitiful. Her two beautiful collarbones were like jade, rising and falling as she breathed. Just by looking at her, just the opening and closing of those red lips made her infatuated with them. He was secretly criticizing Li Dongliang in his heart. Why did he want to get this girl by hook or by crook? This girl did have the capital to make people go through so much trouble. Yun Shishir did not notice the unreadable look in his eyes as she continued to confess. Mo Chingan also reined in his wandering thoughts and listened attentively. However, the more he listened, the more his brows furrowed. If his first impression of her was that she was beautiful, his second impression was that she was arrogant, and his third impression was that she was passionate. This kind of girl, in this kind of era, would either fall and bleed in a hypocritical society or easily offend people she shouldn't. Naturally, she was the latter. It wasn't that he didn't have any sympathy for her. However, compared to sympathy, he felt more pity. After she finished telling him what had happened, Mo Chingan checked the records with her and circled a few places that she had missed. After modifying it, he asked her to put her fingerprints one by one. Mo Chingan lowered his head and began to write a summary of the case. As he wrote, he said faintly, "Your name is Yun Shishir, right?" She nodded. "Yes. You're such a silly girl. You've really made a big mess out of this. Li Dongliang is not someone you can afford to offend." Yun Shishir said nonchalantly, "Indeed, I was in the wrong. I was the one who hurt someone, so even if you want to detain me, arrest me, or convict me, I have nothing to say. But, this should be legitimate self-defense. But that man was suspected of rape and molestation first. According to the law, that Li Dongliang should also be punished. According to the law, she could request to be judged as legitimate self-defense." Mo Chingan shook his head helplessly. He raised his head to look into her eyes and asked in a low voice, "Do you think the rules of this society can be explained with simple words?" Yun Shishir was stunned. She looked up in disbelief and frowned at him. Chapter 1050. Mo Ching-an looked at her calmly and said in a low voice, "Do you know who you've offended?" Yun Shishir, let me tell you what's going to happen next so that you can be mentally prepared. After a pause, he leaned closer to her and said in a low voice, "Soon, the phone on the police station's desk will ring. The man who's calling is a high-ranking official. He has a good relationship with Li Dongliang and is in a high position. First, he'll inform the chief that I'm no longer in charge of this case. Then, you'll be detained for 24 hours. During this long period of time, many unexpected things will happen. Then, someone will take my place to try this case." What does this mean? It means that you no longer have the right to speak as a citizen. This is a simple physical conflict case with no justifiable defense. This case may become a serious and vicious criminal case. It's undeniable that your crime will be aggravated. The reason for your conviction will be unimaginable, but no one will dare to question the authenticity of this reason. Of course, no one will question your rights. To put it bluntly, you'll be forced to confess under torture. Then, you'll go to court to be tried and sentenced. It may be a few decades or even life. If you're lucky, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. But do you know? In prison, too many unknown things happen. Some people even go to prison and never see the sun rise again. Reality is so cruel." After that, he leaned back in his chair. His face was calm as he picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. Yun Shishir's face was ghastly pale. "Why? Why did it become like this? I was just defending myself." She had only hurt someone out of self-defense, but she was sentenced to such a heavy sentence. Mo Cheng-an laughed. "Isn't this world like this? The weak are prey to the strong. The weak are always bullied." Yun Shishir looked at him absent-mindedly. She felt that the so-called rules of the game in this world were so unbelievable. In other words, maybe Li Dongliang would use his personal connections to send her to hell and never make a comeback. Mo Chingan put down his teacup and helplessly sighed, "I'm really sorry. Although I really want to help you, there's nothing I can do in this matter." Yun Shishir lowered her head and fell silent. "If what you said is true, can you do me a favor?" Mo Chingan frowned. "What is it?" Yun Shishir took the pen and wrote a string of numbers on his palm. "Tell him I'm here. Please." Yun Shishir pursed her lips and looked at him. Mo Cheng-an calmly retracted his hand and clenched his fist. Not long after, the phone on the table rang. The sudden ringing woke her up from her reverie. Her shoulders trembled as she looked at the phone with a pale face. The bureau chief patted his stomach and stood up. He walked to the table and picked up the phone. His expression immediately became respectful, and he answered one by one with a smile. Mo Cheng-an's face was expressionless as he crossed his arms over his chest. There was a hint of depression between his brows. Chapter 1051. What happened next was just as Mo Cheng-an had said. Not only was he transferred from the case, but she was also detained by the police. The moment she stepped through the door, she really began to feel at a loss, because she didn't know what was waiting for her after 24 hours. CEO Li, calm down, calm down. It's not a big deal to be angry, but it will hurt your health. Don't make things difficult for yourself because of a little girl. Here, I sincerely apologize to you on her behalf. Apologize? Is an apology useful? Even if that girl kneels at my feet and begs me to let her go, it won't help. Sun Hua, I'm telling you, I'm not done with you. How can you do this? In the hospital ward, the atmosphere was as cold as ice. Li Dongliang was lying on the bed with a frosty expression. His eyelids were heavy as he leaned against the headboard without looking at anyone. Sun Hua, on the other hand, did not have a way out. He could only brace himself and stand by the bed, bowing and groveling. His face was already alternating between green and white. While he could not help feeling annoyed with Yun Shishir, he still had to put on an apologetic smile for Li Dongliang. How could he have known that such a big thing would happen? He originally thought that no matter how unwilling Yun Shishir was, she was at most an unruly kitten. Once she sharpened her claws and taught her a lesson, she would naturally be obedient. However, he didn't know that not long after he left, this chaste girl stabbed the big boss with a pair of scissors. Look at that. Damn it. The wound wasn't shallow. If it was anyone else, their heart would be burning with rage. He raised his head and stole a glance at Li Dongliang's gloomy face. His back started to break out in cold sweat. He thought to himself, if I had known, I wouldn't have tried so hard to send this girl here. A strong woman like Yun Shishir should be sent to the mafia boss for a good lesson. No matter how hard a bone was, it could be tamed. But now, she had offended this big shot in front of him. Li Dongliang, who was he? Who in the capital didn't know this man? Although he was the boss of an entertainment company in name, he had connections behind the scenes. In the early years, this Li Dongliang was not very mature. However, when the company was just established, he had many bad ideas. How did Universal Pictures come to be? Wasn't it all because of some high-ranking officials, the heads of the government, and the leaders of the underworld? Was there even a need to ask why they were willing to support worldwide? Those big shots didn't lack gold or treasures. They just lacked a beauty by their side to have some fun. Thus, during those years, Li Dongliang sent many of the beautiful ladies in the company to them and kept them as mistresses. With such a connection, if they were happy, they would naturally be willing to share a piece of the pie and be willing to open up a path for your company. Therefore, Li Dongliang, whether it was in the legal world or in the underworld, as long as he had some power, he would have some connections, not to mention those who were inextricably linked to him in the dark. In the capital, he was a big shot who could do whatever he wanted. Anyone who saw him would have to give him some face. Now, could Yun Shishir still hope that there would be a way out? Chapter 1052. Regardless of anything else, just the relationship between Li Dongliang and a certain high-ranking official in the capital was enough to suppress her. Not to mention the day of a comeback, it would be a blessing if he was not implicated. Now, it was already difficult for him to think about how to protect himself. How could he still have the time to think about that girl's safety? Damn it, she deserved to die. How could she be so unruly and ungrateful? Thinking about other artistes, they were quite well behaved. Why was it that when it came to him, he had to deal with such a person? He really could not figure it out. In the midst of a myriad of thoughts, he felt helpless, indignant, worried, but more than that, he felt fear and uneasiness. Li Dongliang glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered, "Why are you still standing here? Do you still think I didn't make myself clear? Get lost, don't be an eyesore." Sun Hua gritted his teeth. How could he leave? He had not made things clear yet. He was afraid that he would find trouble with him later. He was still counting on Li Dongliang to make a living. He could not fall in front of this girl. He lowered his voice and said, "Boss Li, I'm really sorry. I didn't expect Yun Shishir to be so unruly, and I didn't expect such a thing to happen." Li Dongliang glared at him fiercely and sneered, "Sun Hua, I don't want to waste my breath. Don't create any more trouble for me. Didn't I ask you to settle the matter properly? Ah. You're just a small singer. Why didn't you learn how to read people's expressions for a living? What's wrong? Do you really think you're Du Shenyang? Being glared at by his sharp gaze, he almost knelt down. Sun Hua felt wronged and was at a loss for words. He felt like he had bitten a mouthful of bitter and astringent coptis. Boss Li, I'll kneel down to you, okay? I'll let you deal with this girl, but, please let me go. Otherwise, I'll be so wronged. Next time. I'll definitely find you an obedient woman next time. There's a next time. This time, she stabbed me in the waist. Next time, you'll send me someone more vicious than Yun Shishir. Won't she stab my family jewels? Are you trying to give me bad luck on purpose? Li Dongliang snorted coldly, obviously not falling for his trick. He turned his head and shouted angrily at him, "Do you think I'm interested in your tricks? Bah! Sun Hua, get lost as far as you can. You were the one who sent this person to me. Now that something has happened, do you think you can just pat your butt and say that everything is fine? In your King dreams. Do you want me to try stabbing you?" Sun Hua's face immediately turned deathly pale. His shoulders trembled, and he couldn't spit out a single word. He thought to himself, this time, it's really over. Wasn't it enough that this B*TCH had harmed him? Did she want to drag him down with her? If Li Dongliang were to slap him, would he still be able to survive? Why are you standing here? Li Dongliang saw him standing there with a bitter face and felt even more irritated. He stretched out his leg and wanted to kick him hard. However, it was fine if he didn't move. Once he moved his leg, perhaps it was too much of a commotion. In his agitation, he accidentally pulled on his wound. Li Dongliang's body twitched, and he grimaced in pain. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He rolled his eyes and saw that Sun Hua was still there. His expression became even uglier. Still not getting lost? Damn it! Chapter 1053. He nodded repeatedly and responded a few times. Then, he turned around and bowed as he left the room. The door of the ward was carefully closed. Li Dongliang was still angry. He kicked the blanket in frustration, but his face turned pale from the pain. In his heart, he was clamoring. He would definitely not forgive this untactful girl. After leaving the hospital, Sun Hua was extremely frustrated. He pulled his hair and gritted his teeth as he cursed. This Yun Shishir was so daring. She even used scissors to stab people. He really didn't understand how Huanyu trained their artists. Now, was he trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it? Originally, he wanted to go to the police station to see Yun Shishir, who had gotten into big trouble. However, after being scolded by Li Dongliang in the ward, he was no longer in the mood to go to the police station. When he thought about offending someone like Li Dongliang, he was so anxious that he stomped his feet. He was at a loss for what to do. Now, even he couldn't protect himself. When that old man was released from the hospital, he might come up with some dirty tricks to deal with him. Thus, a strong hatred for Yun Shishir grew in his heart. When his assistant called to ask if he should go to the police station to think of a way to bail Yun Shishir out, Sun Hua stood on the street with his hands on his waist and shouted angrily, "Why do you care about that girl? Not only did she want to jump into the fire pit, she even dragged us down with her. I really don't understand. We can't even take care of ourselves now, why do we care about her? Let her fend for herself." Damn it! The assistant answered submissively and hung up the phone. Sun Hua was obviously confused from anger. After hanging up the phone, he felt that his head was hot and dizzy. He was still angry and called Kong Xiaoqian, but the phone was busy. Sun Hua didn't think much of it. He took a taxi home and went to bed. On the other hand, although it was a procedural detention, Mo Chingan had more or less helped the poor girl. He used his connections to arrange a relatively clean detention room for her. Locked up with her were a few street girls who had just been caught from the red light district. In the detention room, Yun Shishir leaned against the wall. She tilted her head and looked at this strange world through the iron bars. At this moment, the few female prisoners who were locked in the same cell as her were sizing her up with strange gazes. "Hey, look! It was a new girl." "Oh, look, he's not bad looking." "Shoo, don't let others hear you. She's looking over." A femme fatale's face, dressed so coquettishly, how immoral. In my opinion, maybe they were also caught from the red light district. These days, the red light district is very strict. Don't talk about it. Maybe she's not a young lady. Yun Shusher did not hear their discussion. She lowered her head, looked around, and slowly walked to a corner and sat down. Both of her hands were handcuffed tightly. She raised her hands and looked at the swaying chains. Her eyes darkened bit by bit. There was no light in the entire single cell. There was only a dim incandescent lamp in the corridor. It seemed to have been in disrepair for a long time. Half of the lights were dim. She laid down on the bed, and as soon as her head touched the bedding, her face turned ashen from the unpleasant musty smell. Yun Shusher quickly sat up and leaned against the wall. Chapter 1054. She leaned her head weakly against the cold wall. She squinted her eyes and felt a little sleepy. "Look, it's the newcomer." "Hey! Hey! Hey! TSK. We're talking to you." "Hey, hey! Hey! Newcomer." Just as she closed her eyes, a few voices were heard. Someone pushed Yun Shusher's shoulder. She looked up expressionlessly. Beside her, a few women sat down around her. "Hey! What's your name? What did you do to get in here?" Yun Shusher frowned but did not answer. "Hey! We're asking you a question. Why don't you say anything?" "Young lady, you're quite pretty. Where did you come from?" Yun Shusher pursed her lips but still did not say anything. The female prisoners felt bored and looked at each other. When they looked at Yun Shusher again, their eyes were filled with contempt. "I didn't expect this young lady to act so high and mighty. I think she's that kind of woman." "Hey, you guys don't know. Hey, what kind of crime did you commit? Were you also caught by the anti-prostitution brigade?" Yun Shusher said impatiently, "I killed someone and turned myself in." The detention room suddenly became silent. Everyone did not believe her at first, but when they saw the bloodstains on her hands that she had yet to wipe clean, a few of them suddenly showed fear and hid far away from her. They lowered their voices and started to whisper. "What a murderer! She looks young and pretty, but I didn't expect her to be so vicious." Yun Shusher was not in the mood to listen to what they were talking about. She just looked up at the gray cement ceiling indifferently. Sleepiness came over her unknowingly. Amidst the gossip, she looked down tiredly and fell asleep in the blink of an eye. She did not have a good sleep. Her back was really painful, especially her shoulder, which felt like it was stiff. When he woke up, it was amidst the police officers' shouts and the clanking of metal. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw two men in police uniforms standing in front of the door. They were holding a bunch of keys and knocking on the iron bars. They looked down at her and said coldly, "Hey, wake up." Yun Shusher slowly sat up and rubbed her stiff and painful shoulders. She frowned suspiciously and asked, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" The police officer opened the iron door and yawned. He leaned against the door and waved his hand impatiently. "Come out and follow us." Yun Shusher felt a little uneasy at the inexplicable order. Even so, she still obeyed the order. She stood up and followed behind them. With doubts, she asked, "Where are you taking me?" "Just follow us, don't talk so much nonsense." The attitude of the two police officers was very cold. Thinking about it, they were originally dozing off when they received the order to bring this girl to the chief's office. Now that they were not awake, their mood was burning with anger. As for what happened next, it was simply a fantasy story. What was waiting for her was not punishment or other things, but unexpected freedom. Someone bailed her out with a large sum of money. However, the director didn't dare to accept the huge sum of money sent by this person. Just the name above was enough to make him breathless. In his heart, he thought that even if he offended Li Dongliang, he would let Yun Shishir go. He really could not afford to offend that person. Chapter 1055. The night was quiet, and the neon lights dimmed. After leaving the police station, in the rain, Yun Shishir was politely escorted to a Lincoln limousine by the chief. Even the umbrella was personally fetched for her by the chief, who had braved the rain to get it for her. She couldn't believe that the smiling man in front of her was the same person as the bureau chief who had been cold and indifferent to her earlier. Min Yu was standing in front of the car with an umbrella and a smile. He was dressed in a well-ironed business suit, which made him look very classy. However, when Yun Shishir was escorted to him by the bureau chief, Min Yu couldn't bring himself to smile when he saw her haggard face and miserable appearance. "Miss Yun, are you okay?" Min Yu asked with concern. "Did you suffer in the police station?" "How could that be?" "Oh, how could we let Miss Yun suffer?" The bureau chief smiled awkwardly as he tried to smooth things over. Min Yu ignored him and leaned over to open the back door for Yun Shishir. At the same time, he said to the Bureau Chief Chien, "Sorry to trouble you with this." Hearing this, the old Bureau Chief was really in fear and trepidation. He leaned closer to Min Yu and said softly, "Oh. It's nothing. It's just a small matter. It's my fault for being so magnanimous. I'm indebted to Chairman Mu for taking care of me all this time. I should be the one thanking you." Min Yu smiled and then frowned slightly. "As for Chairman Li, don't worry. I'll take care of this matter. No matter what Chairman Li does, hee." The old bureau chief chuckled and deliberately lowered his voice. "He has to take into account young Master Mu's status, right?" He was absolutely right about this. Even though Li Dongliang was a big shot in the capital, he was still lacking compared to Mu Yaja. Min Yu nodded and smiled. "That's good." The old police chief glanced at Yun Shishir. Thinking of how he had locked her up in jail for a few hours, he began to feel uneasy. He turned to her and said humbly, "Miss Yun Shishir, I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you before. You're a person of great moral stature, so please don't hold a grudge against me. Please don't take my previous offense to heart." Yun Shishir furrowed her brows indifferently. Ignoring him, she got into the car without consulting him. The old bureau chief watched as the car started and drove away. It was a little cold in the car. Min Yu saw Yun Shishir's shoulders hunched. He was afraid that she would catch a cold, so he turned to ask the chauffeur to turn on the heater. Yun Shishir stared fixedly at him. Her face was expressionless, but there was a hint of wariness and vigilance in her eyes. "Who are you?" She didn't seem to know this man. She didn't have any impression of him. Min Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw her looking at him cautiously and suspiciously. He immediately explained, "I'm Chairman Mu's personal assistant. We should have met that day in Chairman Mu's office." Min Yu saw that she was still wary and said patiently, "Don't you remember? Just a few days ago, you were in the chairman's office." His smile was full of sincerity and gave her a great sense of calmness. However, he saw that her shoulders were moving up and down slightly. She seemed to be still in shock and was panting heavily. Min Yu held her shoulders and said, "Don't be nervous. It's all in the past. It's okay. I work for Chairman Mu. I'm not a bad person." Chapter 1056. Was it Mu Yaja who bailed me out? Yes. Yun Shishir was really frightened tonight. She was like a bird startled by the twang of a bough, trembling in fear. I don't have to go to jail anymore. Miss Yun, don't worry. Boss will arrange everything, he answered calmly. Then. Where is he? Why didn't he come? You know, with boss's identity, it's not convenient for him to show up. I'll send you home now. Boss is waiting for you at home. Yun Shishir pursed her lips and nodded. After a night of twists and turns, she was in a sorry state. Her clothes were disheveled, and the hem of her clothes and cuffs were stained with hideous bloodstains. Now, they were a little black. Sitting in the car, she quickly couldn't resist the fatigue and fell asleep. The car drove into Yunshanshi. Yunshanshi sleepily felt herself being pulled into a warm embrace. Her eyelids were very heavy, and she couldn't open them for a while. At this moment, the sky was already bright. When Muyaja carried Yunshanshi into the bedroom, he couldn't even feel the weight of the person in his arms. She was too light. She was so thin that he couldn't even hold her waist. Her heart ached a little. He didn't even dare to use too much strength. He felt that if he wasn't careful, he would break the bones of the person in his arms. Muyaja placed her on the bed and turned on the wall lamp. He looked at the woman who was curled up into a ball, only to see that her clothes were tattered and torn into thousands of rags. It was obvious that someone had torn them apart. Muyaja searched her body and saw that there were countless strangulation marks and bruises on her body. How could this woman get hurt so easily? Muyaja's dark eyes searched her body over and over again. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the bloodstains on her hand that had not been wiped clean. His face turned cold, and he immediately grabbed her hand nervously to examine it carefully. After a careful examination, there were no wounds on her body. The bloodstains on her hands shouldn't be hers. His wrists were scarred by handcuffs. The red marks were very eye-catching. He was still worried and carefully checked her body, but his gaze suddenly fell on the kiss mark on her shoulder. Although it was called a hickey, it was more like a mark left by someone who had fiercely bitten him. His gaze instantly turned gloomy, and a chill shot out from the depths of his eyes, as if he wanted to freeze the entire world. There was no need to think about what she had gone through. According to Minyu, she used a pair of scissors to stab someone. Later, she called the police and was arrested on suspicion of intentional injury. She was not brave enough to hurt others. She had always been a gentle person. No matter what happened, she would never easily hurt others. However, what kind of desperate situation was she in that she didn't even hesitate to hurt someone? Most likely, he had been forced to the point where he had nowhere else to go. That was why he had done this. According to Min Yu's report, Li Dongliang's side was unable to restrain their anger and was preparing to falsely accuse her of intentional homicide. All the servants in the villa would provide conclusive testimony as witnesses. However, according to the law, what she had done was only justified self-defense. It was obvious that Li Dongliang wanted her dead. Damn it. Chapter 1057. Yun Shishir opened her eyes in the darkness. In her hazy vision, she saw a tall and white figure beside her. It was so dark that it blocked all the light. She tried her best to open her eyes, but she couldn't see who the person in front of her was. She could only vaguely tell that the man in front of her was emitting a sharp aura. Now, she couldn't help but feel a little jittery and paranoid. She felt the murderous aura from the man, and her body quivered as she suddenly became clear-headed. Ah! She let out a cry of surprise and abruptly shrank back. The man leaned forward slightly and scooped her up with his long arms. She fell into a familiar and warm embrace. Don't be afraid. It's me. Muyaja's gentle and mellow voice sounded above her head. Following that, a familiar fragrance wafted into her nose. It was the unique fragrance of his body, and it made her feel extremely at ease. The moment she heard his deep voice, Yun Shishir realized that she had returned home and was safe. She snuggled into his broad and warm embrace and wrapped her arms around his waist. At this moment, her heart, which had been restless all this while, finally settled down. At that moment, there were too many grievances that she wanted to tell him, but she didn't know where to start. However, her tears were the first to flow out. Yun Shishir tried her best to hold it in, but when she tried to open her mouth, her throat was choked with sobs. Muyaja, her voice was hoarse and trembling. At that moment, she seemed to be in a state of shock as her entire body was trembling. I'm here. He gave her such a firm response that he couldn't help but hug her trembling body even tighter. Muyaja. You. Why did you only come now? Mu Yaja was stunned. I waited for you for so long. Why did you only appear now? It sounded like she was complaining and questioning him. In her world, she saw him as a god, an omnipotent figure. Why did he only appear now? Why did he appear so late? When she was so helpless, why didn't he appear earlier? Mu Yaja clenched his fists and hugged her even tighter. Her words were like a sharp blade that tore open a bloody wound in his heart, causing him to feel a sharp pain. Mu Yaja lowered his eyes and hid the love and tenderness in his eyes. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. Sorry, I'm late. His deep and magnetic voice rang forcefully in her ears. Yun Shishir's lips trembled. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer and burst out. The grievances and humiliation that she had suffered, as well as the fear and terror that she had experienced, all gathered in her tears and rolled down. Mu Yaja kissed her gently to soothe her. He grabbed her fair jade-like chin and pressed his thin lips against the corner of her eyes, kissing away her bitter tears. He kissed her eyebrows, the tip of her nose, her cheeks, and finally kissed her lips. Under his patient coaxing, Yun Shishir calmed down a little. Her tense body also relaxed a little. However, she still had lingering fears and the fear in her heart couldn't completely dissipate. Tonight's scene must have left an indelible nightmare in her heart. Thinking of this, Mu Yaja couldn't suppress his anger anymore. There was only one thought in his mind. Who on earth had such guts to do this? The woman that he couldn't bear to bully was actually bullied to this extent. Chapter 1058. Who was it that dared to bully his woman like this? They deserved to die. Mu Yaja frowned coldly. If Yun Shishir were to look up at this moment, she would definitely be frightened by his icy gaze. Those close to him, on the other hand, knew that he was truly enraged. Yun Shishir rubbed her eyes. Her eyelids felt extremely heavy. Mu Yaja lowered his head and asked, "Are you tired?" "Yes." She nodded. He said, "Then go take a shower, okay? Change into a clean set of clothes and get some sleep." Yun Shishir pursed her lips and nodded gently. Thus, he got up and carried her in his arms. He walked into the bathroom and placed her in the bathtub. The bathtub was already filled with water. He had already ordered someone to prepare it in advance. The temperature of the water was just right. It was neither too cold nor too hot. Yun Shishir sank into the water. The refreshing temperature quickly enveloped her. Mu Yaja wanted to bathe for her. However, Yun Shishir smiled and said, I'll do it myself." "You'll do it yourself?" He raised his eyebrows and seemed to be worried. Yun Shishir smiled and said, "I'll do it myself." Mu Yaja nodded and walked out of the bathroom. The first thing he did after walking out of the bathroom was to call Min Yu on his cell phone. Min Yu immediately reported to him, "Boss, Li Dongliang is in the hospital now. I've already sent someone to keep an eye on him." "Okay. Keep an eye on him." Also, in the hotel suite, Min Yu glanced at the father and daughter of the Kong Corporation sitting on the sofa. He held the phone and reported in a low voice, "Mr. Kong and Miss Kong of the Kong Corporation are here to visit you. They're already waiting for you. Let them wait. I have something to ask them." "Okay, I'll pass on the message." Mu Yaja hung up the phone, his handsome eyes narrowing in a calm and unruffled manner. Kong Qixian. Kong Shaoqian, these two came at the right time. I have a debt to settle with them. He slowly walked to the window, took out a cigarette from the pack, lit it, and slowly took a deep puff. A puff of smoke went down his throat and into his lungs. However, even with such a thick smoke, it was difficult to brush away the annoyance in his heart. All this time, there had never been a matter that could make him so anxious and uneasy, lose his sense of propriety, and lose his composure. However, at this moment, he had no choice but to force himself to remain calm. At the very least, he had to pretend to be calm in front of her. Otherwise, she would feel uneasy and nervous. The most important thing right now was to appease her emotions. After she calmed down and fell asleep, he would have the time to slowly settle this debt. In the bathroom, Yun Shishir soaked her body with water. Then, she picked up the shower ball, squeezed out some shower gel, and began to carefully wipe her body. However, when she saw the ghastly bloody scars all over her body, countless, densely packed wounds were scattered all over her body. Especially on her fair and flawless skin, they were extremely eye-catching. When she saw the bruises all over her body, her eyes were like a revolving lantern. The scenes of Li Dongliang's violence against her kept flashing before her eyes. Oh my god, so dirty. So dirty. Yun Shishir felt a sense of irritation. She frowned and impatiently turned on the shower head. The water splashed on her body, and the warmth washed over her body. She hugged her shoulders and slowly opened her eyes, allowing the water to drip down her eyelashes. Chapter 1059. Yun Shishir resisted the urge to be disgusted and scrubbed her body vigorously with the bath ball. Her skin was extremely sensitive. Even a light pinch would leave a deep red mark. Now, she was scrubbing with all her might, as if she couldn't wait to rub off a layer of skin. Her body was scrubbed with glaring bloodstains, mottled and ragged. Looking from afar, it was truly a ghastly sight. In her mind, countless noises echoed in her ears. Ha ha ha. Fine. Even if you're Mu Yaja's woman, I'll treat you as his woman. Today, I'll have a good taste of Mu Yaja's woman. You're just a plaything by his side. Do you think he likes you? A man like Mu Yaja is high and mighty. How can he fall in love with a woman like you? Do you think it's so easy to step into the Mu family? Believe it or not, even if I kill you, he won't even blink for you. Damn it. You don't know what's good for you. If you can do it for other men, why can't you do it for me? Are you looking down on me? Yun Shishir's breath suddenly quickened. She closed her eyes tightly, but it was as if Li Dongliang's hideous and ugly face was reflected in her eyes. You're just an actress. What dignity do you have for an actress? Dirty, really dirty. Yun Shishir looked at the scattered hickeys, pinch marks, and those bruises. Just looking at those unsightly marks was enough to forcibly stuff those nightmarish scenes into her mind. Yun Shishir, be with me. Whether it's a villa or a luxury car, I'll let you have whatever you want. I want you, I want you. Yun Shishir clenched her teeth so hard that it was as if she wanted to crush them. The nightmarish scenes in her mind were getting more and more chaotic. She finally broke down. She desperately covered her ears and screamed crazily, "Ah, shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Don't say any more. I don't want to. I don't want that." Mu Yaja stood in front of the window, but vaguely heard the screams coming from the bathroom. He was shocked and quickly rushed into the bathroom. However, the scene in front of him caused his eyes to hurt. His heart was throbbing with pain. He saw Yun Shishir sitting in the bathtub. Her body had been rubbed so hard that it was red. Streaks of blood-red marks appeared as if they were filled with blood. The places that were ravaged hard actually had dense blood spots. It was a shocking sight. She covered her ears with all her might, her face twisted with struggle. Then, she suddenly opened her blood-red eyes and began to rub her body even harder as if she had gone mad. The water stains on his body had long since dried. Without the lubrication of the water, a swollen, blood-red mark was left on his body. Mu Yaja rushed over and grabbed her wrist tightly to stop her. What are you doing? Are you crazy? I want to scrub it clean. I want to scrub those filthy things off my body. But I feel that I can't scrub it clean. It's so dirty, sob sob sob, so dirty. Yun Shishir broke down and choked with sobs. Her eyes could not stop rolling. Chapter 1060. But, it's so dirty. So dirty. What should I do? Yun Shishir stared at him helplessly. I feel like I can't wash it clean. It's so dirty. Where is it dirty? Here, here, and here. Yun Shishir pointed at the red marks on her shoulder and then at her neck where Li Dongliang had kissed her. Here, it's all so dirty. As Yun Shishir spoke, she wanted to break free from his grip and try to wash it clean again. Mu Yaja stopped her harshly, not allowing her to torture herself again. Stop rubbing. It's not dirty. As he said that, he suddenly leaned forward and pressed his thin lips on her shoulder. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, he lightly dotted it a few times, as if he was marking something. It's not dirty anymore, okay? Yun Shishir was stunned. Mu Yaja gently kissed her neck again. Bit by bit, he carefully kissed the area she had pointed out. It was as if he wanted to use his breath to cover the so-called filth that she had mentioned. It's not dirty here either. As he spoke, he kissed the red mark on her collarbone. Be good, okay? Yun Shishir was stunned. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air and slowly hugged his shoulders. Her emotions gradually calmed down because of his gentle coaxing. Mu Yaja took the shower ball from her hands and threw it aside. He took the towel and carefully wiped her body. Yun Shishir was a little embarrassed and immediately wanted to take the towel from him. Let me do it, Mu Yaja suddenly held her raised hand. He lowered his head and kissed her palm gently. Don't move. Be good. A warm feeling traveled from her fingertips to her heart, as if injecting warmth into her cold heart. Yun Shishir's expression softened. She stopped struggling and allowed him to carefully wipe her body. His movements were extremely gentle, as though he was afraid that he would hurt her. His movements were extremely light. Yun Shishir's shoulders trembled slightly. Because of his touch, her body became extremely sensitive. She hugged her knees and lowered her head, making it difficult to see the expression on her face. Mu Yaja couldn't help but ask, what are you thinking about? Mu Yaja. Yun Shishir slowly frowned. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. Mu Yaja smiled and kissed the side of her ear, comforting her, don't think too much, be good. What if you came a little later? A trace of pain appeared in his eyes. She slowly placed her hand on the back of his hand. If I'm defiled by another man, Mu Yaja furrowed his brows and immediately interrupted her wild thoughts. I won't let that happen. After a pause, he stared at her and pursed his lips. I will protect you. Yun Shishir was stunned. However, in a certain aspect, she was extremely stubborn. Therefore, she still asked stubbornly, what if it happens one day? It was as if she was eager to find an answer. Yun Shishir stared at him, wanting to get an answer from him. Mu Yaja's thin lips moved slightly and said, if it really happens one day. Yun Shishir suddenly couldn't help but feel nervous. She stared at him, unwilling to let go of any expression on his face. She was so nervous that she felt a little suffocated.